Mr. E back on the mic again, interviewing Tracy Twyman, who has an interesting background writing and publishing her own magazine, starting at age 18, and she's put out a number of books after that. So, Tracy, how's it going?
Everything's going great. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show.
We also have with us today Demi Diasis. You want to give a shout out to your people, Demi?
Hi there.
All right, so Tracy R. Twyman, I guess it all began in Oregon, huh? Where you grew up. You were writing for The Bridge, the Portland Community College newspaper, starting at age 16. Did you have any interest in Masonic history before that? I'm guessing that that's what you were writing when you were writing for The Bridge.
Well, yeah, I had just probably a few months before I started writing for The Bridge, I had learned about Freemasonry and their influence on the history of the United States mainly. And that sort of got me started on reading alternate history books, I guess, about the United States. And I mean, I guess you would call it conspiracy theories, but I really sort of early on kind of figured out that there were a lot of different stories, and but a common thread amongst all of them, and that if I started really doing research, I could figure out what was real and what was fantasy. My point is that I from the very beginning, I treated it very seriously. I knew that I was looking for truth and that I wasn't just entertaining myself, and I started writing about, I guess my first article was about the possibility that AIDS was a bioweapon. And put that right in the school newspaper, and I was a pretty controversial writer there right away. I started getting a lot of letters, and they put me in charge of the opinion page column right away. And I got a lot of experience there in writing and journalism and doing really serious research. I worked there for 2 years, and I just got a lot of experience in that stuff. And at one point, I came across the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and I learned about alternate European history from that. And that just really opened my eyes. That really got me interested in learning not just about what was going on in my own country, but what is the alternative history of the world, and what's the real influence of secret societies and strange religious beliefs on our leaders and our history. So at that point, it really something kind of mystical happened to me, where I felt like this was sort of my mission in life. At the time, that's how I felt, that I need to penetrate this mystery of the Holy Grail and the Grail bloodline and the secret societies associated with it. And this idea came to me while I was researching. I was studying for a calculus exam the next day, actually. And instead of studying, I was sitting there just sort of channeling this idea for a magazine about the Holy Grail, and specifically it was going to be try to persuade the reader that this magazine is produced by the Priory of Zion. It was produced by a secret society front organization for the Priory of Zion. And so that was the idea in me putting it together. It was sort of, I was inventing my own form of propaganda. I was pretending that this organization really existed. I sort of believed that it did, but I wasn't actually affiliated with it. And that I really believed that the Grail bloodline, going back to Jesus and perhaps other historical figures, had this right to rule Europe and perhaps all of the world, And I just sort of invented this mindset, this eschatology, that I thought, if a person like this exists, this is what they would believe. And then I started backing it up with my own research. And as the years wore on, I did put Dagobert's Revenge out, and I did produce it for several years. I started doing even more serious research on this topic, and kind of dropped a lot of the pretense and just started doing really lengthy articles about this topic. and I feel like I really sort of figured it out in a way. I over the years, I think I figured out what all of the symbolism in the story of the Holy Grail means, what the Priory of Zion was trying to say about secrets they allegedly hold in their archives, and also these legends of a Grail bloodline. I think I figured out what that's about too, and it's not just going back to Jesus. It's going back all the way to the beginnings of human history. It's going back to what people call the Nephilim, the fallen angels that supposedly bred with human women. So that's where my research led. It started off, with this kooky idea that I'm gonna put out this propaganda magazine on behalf of the Priory of Zion, and it ended up with doing serious research into the hidden history, not only of Europe but the world, and sort of comparative religion, comparative mythology, trying to find a common thread amongst all those things. So that's the early part of my career, I suppose.
So, Tracy, I know about the history of the Masons, let's say, going back to the builders of the Gothic cathedrals, who, with the compass and the square, were able to achieve these engineering feats by trial and error. Build it steeper, build it so steep that it collapses, step back, build it with the most steep angle you can to create these impressive, awesome structures. And, that's how I see the roots of Freemasonry. Now, is this other branch of Freemasonry that's talked about in like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, does that have a connection with the Gothic cathedral builder Masons?
Yes, absolutely. Freemasonry, actually, from my research, goes all the way back to ancient Sumeria. But as far as the connection with the Priory of Zion, the Grail bloodline, the first Masonic lodge that's recognized really is Roslin Chapel in Scotland. It was called Lodge Number 1, and that was built by the patronage of the Stuart kings in Scotland, and they were also the patrons of Freemasonry in Scotland, and they were of the Grail bloodline. It's sort of the British branch of the Grail bloodline. The Stuart kings were. So they were associated with Freemasonry from the very beginning. And this Priory of Zion that is alleged to exist, alleged to go back to the time of the Templars. Actually, they say the Templars were their military arm. Of course, the Templars are sort of forebears of the Freemasons. There's a lineage there from Freemasonry down back to Templarism. All those things are connected. The Priory of Zion, the Templar, and the Freemasons, sort of the same strain of tradition. And what was specifically your question?
Well, it was the connection between these builders. I mean, that's a public version of Freemasonry that's presented in the history book. So that's how I know about it.
Oh well,
There's a whole other history of Freemasonry that's kind of a secret history, because I sure didn't read that ever growing up in any book.
I think that Freemasonry is really perceived by outsiders as being one specific thing, when it's very much a loose body of traditions. And there's many different strains of Freemasonry, really. It's kind of like, it's comparable to how Catholicism really has spawned a lot of different offshoots. And some of these claim direct lineage back to the Catholic Church and the Pope. There's some bishops out there in the world today practicing their own rites of Catholicism, but because they were properly ordained by a real Catholic bishop or someone, they're from a lineage of people that have been properly ordained, they consider themselves to be legitimate, and the Catholic Church really has never repudiated the fact that these wandering bishops, as they're called, are legitimate also. In a similar way, the Templars really are the founders of all modern secret societies, or most of them. Most of the ones that really have some, power and influence behind the scenes in our world today, claim some sort of lineage going back to the Templars. And the thing is that on an occult level, that lineage is going to be legitimate for every single one of those groups that claims a connection, if there is a connection. If one person from the original Templars handed down the secrets to someone else, or tapped that person, anointed that person, and then that person anointed someone else, that's a legitimate magical current, as they call it. That's a legitimate stream. So you've got tons of organizations now that are legitimate continuers of the traditions of the Templars, and the same is true of Freemasonry. I mean, Freemasonry is one of those strains, and then in itself has spawned several different other strains. It's really just a body of traditions and rituals that can be interpreted and reformed in many different ways. So that's why I often defend Freemasonry, because I think that the belief that all of these people are involved in some sort of conspiracy is totally wrong. And also I think that some of the Masonic conspiracies that have occurred in the past, from the judgment of modern history, were not evil. Anyone who conspires to revolt against the current system, to dethrone the king, is part of a conspiracy, because it's illegal at that time. Right. But afterwards, and when you reform the government, that revolution is perceived as being, the beginnings of your country's history. It's looked on as when you gained independence. So it's not. I don't perceive the American Revolution to have been evil, and it was definitely a Masonic conspiracy. So I guess that's my point. There's a lot of I'm friends with tons of Freemasons, and I think that there are political movements forming inside some lodges, but I also think that a lot of them are totally apolitical, and and then there's some that are totally rogue, like P2 in Italy, and then they also had influence in South America, and totally just running mafia government there. And it's Freemasonry, because people go there and sort of bond to each other and agree to back each other up on things, and also because they're keeping each other's secrets. It's the perfect place for a conspiracy to form. It's also the perfect place for a revolution to form that, may be positive in nature. So, I guess a lot of people think that there's something wrong with people meeting in secret. I don't agree, but that's just my opinion.
Well, what I'd wonder is, how can you prevent people from meeting in secret? This is impossible, to my knowledge. The book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, do you agree with it overall?
Gosh, I guess not, probably, at this point. I think that they were strung along by the Priory of Zion. I don't even agree with my own book now, okay? As the years go on, I learn more, and I revise my opinions. So I know that the authors of that book, revise their opinions too, especially Henry Lincoln, one of the three authors, went on to basically recant a lot of the things that were written in the book. But no, the controversy has to do with the Priory of Zion, and whether the people that claim to represent it now actually have any connection to the Templars, or to the Order of Zion that is recorded in history, that did exist in the 1400s at least. We know that they had a preceptory in Jerusalem. And it was an order of monks. Well, is that organization really connected, as they claim it is, to the modern organization that was registered in France in 1956? Most people today, most researchers, don't think it is connected. I think it's possible that it is connected on some level, having to do with what I just described about, the magical current, the lineage that isn't necessarily recorded in the history books, but was passed down from one person to another. I actually think that there's probably more than one Priory of Zion, and that they all, have some claim of legitimacy that might be based on something. You can't, as an outsider, really know. I think that people are looking for the Priory of Zion to be like the Freemasons, to be, a really verifiable group of people that actually does things, and I think that that's erroneous. I think that a lot of the secret societies that exist don't have regular meetings. They don't do things in public very often. They don't even do things together very often. And what it really consists of is people that have taken an oath at one time and have agreed to all be a part of something. And the thing then exists spiritually. There's a spiritual bond between them all. And that is what the secret society is for the most part. The Priory of Zion, even if it's something that's only existed since the 50s, is still an intergenerational thing that's been going on. They've been putting out information claiming to know the secret history of Europe, the secret history of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. They've been claiming that there's a treasure buried in southern France that has to do with the Holy Grail. They've been claiming this since the 1950s. So if it's a hoax, as a lot of people claim it is, why are they doing this? I'm not saying it isn't a hoax, but it's a really weird one. Why have they been dangling this in front of the public for so many years? Why are so many people involved in it and they're not making any money off of it? So I don't really know what it's about, but I think it's something occult. I think that people are looking at it from the wrong perspective, that if you were an occultist, you would understand it better, that they're doing something magical. Okay, that's I guess my way of summarizing it at this point.
The Holy Grail talks about the Merovingian bloodline and Jesus as being the root of that bloodline. Now you're saying it goes back farther in history. Do you think Jesus, in his lost years, that they don't talk about in the Bible, do you think that he received initiation into a secret society?
Yes, I think that's very likely. I think that Jesus was continuing a hidden tradition, and that the exoteric interpretation of what he's doing has always been wrong. I think that the best way of understanding Jesus probably is to read the book Jesus the Magician. I think that he was involved in doing occult rituals.
Jesus the Magician, who wrote that?
I think the guy's last name was Morton. I don't have it on me. It's actually out of print. It's hard to find, but it goes through all of these texts about Jesus performing magical rituals, and then later Gnostic texts that were really rituals for people to do where they call on the name of Jesus. And this is, shortly within 100 years after Jesus' death. So we're talking about, or very early traditions. There's Jewish traditions that basically say that's the reason why he was killed, is because he was a magician, So I think that that's the proper way to interpret Jesus' ministry is from an occult perspective. Yes, go ahead.
And I was always kind of curious about the numerology in the Bible, especially when Jesus supposedly was crucified. Didn't he die at age 33?
Yes.
And is there any significance to that?
Well, 33 is an important number to the Freemasons, and they have 33 degrees in the Scottish Rite, although they only publicly acknowledge 32. And the 33rd degree is this mysterious thing that there's theories about what the ritual is. I can tell you what I think, and it might tie into the Jesus thing somehow. Mm-hmm. From my research, it seems to me that the 33rd degree ritual is one in which because Freemasonry is basically, especially Scottish Rite, it's about becoming a magician. It's about becoming an alchemist, and you learn how to manipulate reality over as you progress through the degrees. And after you get to the 32nd degree, they stop instructing you on what to do, and you have to figure it out on your own. You initiate yourself into the 33rd degree. When you realize that you are 33rd degree, that's when you're 33rd degree. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued by that. For instance, I have a friend. He became a Freemason at the youngest age that he could because, as he told me, his great-grandfather was 32nd degree, and gave him the advice when he was a little kid that if he wanted to rise to the 32nd degree, he'd have to start as young as possible and just work up through the ranks. So he did. But this person that I used to collaborate with when I was younger, he expressed that the Freemasons were to him a philanthropic and social organization that he was making connections through to better himself.
Right. Yeah, I think that, when I'm describing them as learning magic, some of them understand that and some of them don't. They're learning, but only a few of them who are really aware know what they're learning. But what I think the purpose that it really serves in a community is they're sort of doing magic on behalf of the community. If they're there, if it's your town lodge and they're meeting on the full moon every month, part of what they're doing really is sort of cleansing the town itself. They're like in charge of, they've appointed themselves, but they're in charge of maintaining the well-being of the town through magic. And so the rituals that they're doing have that effect, even if a lot of them aren't aware of what they're doing.
That's an excellent explanation. Very interesting. I've never really heard that explanation given before.
Neither have I. I came up with it myself, but I think it's true.
Well, it's nice to meet an original thinker. So you published Dagobert's Revenge starting at age 18 for, you're saying 5 years or so?
Yeah, it was out for about 6 years, and it really sort of, it started with a bang, but fizzled because I didn't really have a budget at the time to keep doing it. So after the first issue, we didn't have another one for a while. But when I started putting it out again, it really caught on in the late 90s. I remember I took the second issue over to some record stores in New York, and they were apprehensive, but they put some on their shelves, and then I came back the next week and they said that they had all sold out in record time, and they ordered more, and I was really surprised because I just thought this is the kookiest thing in the world. I had talked to some other people who put out zines, and they were just so bitter about it. They said, it costs so much money and no one reads it, you're wasting your time. And then I told them what I wanted to publish a magazine about, and they're like, oh my God, They had been putting out stuff about at least heavy metal bands and things that they thought someone would be interested in. And here I'm talking about something completely esoteric and unheard of. Right. But that's what sold it, the niche audience had never seen anything like it before, and they loved it. So that's, it took off for a while. I was, living a miserly living, mostly off of the proceeds of the magazine, and things were going great for a while. But our last issue, basically, the printer charged us double what he had quoted and held our magazines hostage until we paid him. So I had to max out all these credit cards to pay him, and everything just went downhill from there. And that's why that was the last issue.
Okay, so to move on, you've got a series of books here that I see in the table in front of me. The first one is called The Merovingian Mythos and the Mystery of, how do you pronounce that?
Rennes-le-Château.
And the Mystery of Rennes-le-Château. Tell me about this book real quick. I mean, we've been talking about this subject for a while, but tell me about the content of this book if you could.
Sure, yeah. This is basically the summation of all the years of research that I did for the magazine. And I come to the conclusion, as I said, that this bloodline goes back to the Garden of Eden, to the serpent that tempted Eve, was really a representation of this race of fallen angels that interbred with humans and created a race of kings. And the first Sumerian kings were hybrids of this interbreeding. And that's sort of where the tradition of kingship came from. And then I show how myths about European kings harken back to this, and especially this particular bloodline, the Merovingians in France, and how that sort of traces of this can also be found in the traditions of all of these secret societies. Not all of them, obviously, but specifically Freemasonry, Templarism, and the Priory of Zion.
Okay, so the book right next to it is, I'm assuming, the second book that you published, which is a best of Dagobert's Revenge magazine. The book is entitled The Arcadian Mystique. Right. And so these are these articles that different people wrote for your magazine, and some written by yourself, or what's in this book?
Okay. Well, it's mainly articles by me and also one of the collaborators, Boyd Rice. And it's mostly the best, most hardcore articles. I mean, in the early issues we had, as I described, some of these sort of propaganda pieces that were meant to be kind of artistic and funny. This has all of the, sort of hardcore research that led up to the writing of the Merovingian mythos, that where we piece together all of these mysteries. And I didn't mention, but yeah, in addition to researching the history of the bloodline, we also researched the history of these alleged artifacts, treasures that are supposed to be buried in Rennes-le-Château, which is in southern France, and basically came to the conclusion that's what's there is this ancient necropolis. The graves of the ancient god kings that are talked about in the Bible. The theory is basically that Cain was the first king, that he was the first human hybrid from this bloodline, and that you can find the Cain figure in the Bible. You can find it in the history of ancient Sumeria, the history of ancient Egypt. They all tell this story of the same figure, and the name is almost the same. Yeah. So the theory is that in Rennes-le-Château, there's actually the grave of Cain, and also some of his ancestors, immediate ancestors, and that these people weren't the same as you or I, because they were from this bloodline of fallen angels, whatever they are. If you think they're aliens, I don't know. I don't try to claim that I know what they were, but they weren't human, and they were taller than regular humans. They had radiant white skin and glowing eyes, and they had a lot of properties, abilities that seemed sort of supernatural, at least to the people that were chronicling them at the time. So my theory is that if you there's a lot of tunnels underneath Rennes-le-Château, and that's where people think that the Holy Grail is buried. And I think it's quite possible, from the hints and allegories from the local folklore there in Rennes-le-Château, it seems they're talking about that there's this grave of Cain underneath there, and lots of other graves. And I think that you might find the bones of maybe a giant, basically, something that's human but more than human,
Oh, very interesting. So next to The Arcadian Mystique is a book entitled Solomon's Treasure, The Magic and Mystery of America's Money. And so when did Solomon's Treasure come out?
Well, yeah, in 2005, the year after I published Merovingian Mythos, I just felt like I had really done the Grail subject, and I wanted to move on. And in my research, I had learned some interesting things about the history of the $1 bill and some of the symbolism on it. And also, I had learned a lot about alchemy, I guess you would call it, and ritual magic. And I also, when I was much younger, when I was 16 working for the school paper, I had learned about the Federal Reserve and about the fact that they print money out of nothing and then loan it to people with interest due, and that's how the economy works. It's just this kind of amazing Ponzi scheme scam, you know. But at the same time, there's something magical about it. That as long as the illusion keeps going, it keeps working. And that basically is what ritual magic is. You create an illusion, and if everyone believes it, then it is real. It's real until everyone stops believing it. And the traditions of alchemy really don't have to do just with turning lead into gold, but you have to actually have a sample of gold in order to create it. You have to sort of multiply gold. It's kind of like the loaves and the fishes. And you know, I don't know if alchemy was ever a real science or not, but I think it's certainly an allegory for how magic works. And when I started looking in 2005 and thinking about the monetary system and how it works, I just thought, you know what, this is alchemy. And come to think of it, since our founding fathers were Freemasons, and a lot of people in positions of power are members of secret societies, I just wonder if maybe the people who designed this had that in mind, that, you know, the Federal Reserve is called the temple because they create money out of nothing, and it's kind of like this magical process. It's one of the slang terms that's used for it in Washington. And you know what? It's real. I mean, they really mean that. And when I started looking at the $1 bill, I realized, okay, there's all these mystical symbols all over it. But it's not just what people think that, it's a symbol of the evil New World Order conspiracy. No, there's something pertaining to the monetary policy and the concept of alchemy here. So I started noticing that the word "in God we trust" sort of implies that you need to trust in the dollar, you know, and that it has God's blessing. So trust in the dollar the way you trust God. The use of the number 13, not only all over the $1 bill, but throughout our history, pertains to ritual magic. It pertains to Baphomet, which is this symbol that was used in Templar rituals and in Masonic rituals, and it really symbolizes the philosopher's stone of the alchemists. So what that means is it symbolizes this essence that is believed to be at the heart of all matter, that can be used to transmute any kind of matter from one thing into another, or to multiply something from a very small amount to a large amount. That really is what the number 13 represents, that concept. And the other things that it says on the $1 bill, it actually uses the number 1 or the word 1 or unum, Latin for one. There's 13 occurrences of that. And that caused me to think, you know what? Maybe the number 1 on this bill isn't just used because it's the $1 bill. Maybe they're saying something. And what they're saying is they're talking about unity. They're talking about trying to bind us all together in society and create this sense of unity and connect that to the dollar, because, you know, money passes from one hand to another. It's really the thing that connects us as a society. We don't have much of a history here in America, but money is really what binds us all together. And people even say that, you know, the business of America is business, that's sort of what defines us, and that's how we're known throughout the rest of the world. Our dollar is the reserve currency for the central banks of other countries. And, you know, everyone knows what the $1 bill looks like all over the world. So my point really with that part of the book is that the dollar is a magical talisman, the physical dollar, and the dollar itself, even the electronic ones, are magical representations of gold. they aren't gold, but they're supposed to be as good as gold. And so they have to create all of this magical illusion to try to make people feel that way, that they are as good as gold. And then, the rest of the book, I sort of trace it then back through history. I show how the Templars invented the checking system. So really, fractional reserve lending, which is how the Federal Reserve works, was invented by the Templars. And then I just take it all the way back to ancient Sumeria, and I show that money has been associated with religion and magical rituals since the very beginning. The first instance of the use of money is in ancient Sumer, in the Temple of Ishtar. They had these tokens that you could buy. You would go with your ritual offering of a bushel of wheat, and you give that to the temple. They give you this coin, and then you use that coin to go patronize the temple prostitutes. And that's all part of the ritual. And that's how money was created. So the whole book is really about the esoteric history of money. We start off with America, and then we go all the way back to the beginning of history.
Demidiocese would like to make an interjection.
I was curious about any possible relationship between America's money system and the Rothschild dynasty. Do you have any input on that?
Yeah, a little bit. That the modern incarnation of fractional reserve lending, I said it was kind of invented by the Templars because they invented the checking system in about the 1200s, basically. The 12th century. But the system that we're currently using is really an extension of the system created by the Bank of England. And that was specifically created by the Rothschild family. And really, what they sort of invented was this system of... Originally, they were goldsmiths. And they would literally... they were paid to hold people's gold in strong boxes. That was originally what a bank was supposed to do. Just hold your gold for you, and you pay them a small fee in exchange for doing that, to keep it safe from the robbers. And what they discovered was that most people just kept their gold there and didn't check on it very often. Okay, so they came up with this system of loaning people credits that represent the gold that they had in their vaults, but loaning out more gold than they actually had, and of course not asking the people who had given them the gold, whether it was okay for them to loan it out or not. And it was the beginnings of a Ponzi scheme, where they came up with this ratio. They said, okay, for every $10 that we loan out worth of gold, or I guess 10 pounds, only one person ever comes to collect theirs. So we can keep this going and keep making money because people will pay back their loans with real money, and we never actually have to have the real money except for 1 pound worth. And somehow this became legitimized over time as this is the way a bank is supposed to operate. And, it's really kind of hard to believe, but that is what happened. That's how our modern economic system was born. And even though some of the founding fathers tried to prevent it from happening here in the United States, eventually it did. Eventually, wars caused us to become indebted to banks that were associated with the Rothschild family. And they forced on us, as sort of a condition of that loan, that we would have to do it through this central bank that would be privately owned but orchestrated by the government, or tied in with the government. And what it ended up doing really was controlling the government. What happened was that now we basically have a corporately owned, privately owned government that operates for the profit of a handful of individuals. The monetary system itself basically siphons real wealth out of the hands of the public and channels it into the hands of this banking cartel. And it's covered up through inflation, through printing more dollars than was there before. And every time you do that, it deflates the value of everyone's dollars. But the people that are at the top of the hierarchy, the people that are involved in the banks that get the money issued by the Federal Reserve Bank first, that's called high-powered money. It is worth more when it comes out of the Federal Reserve first than it is later as it gets filtered on down the line. So when they're trying to bring us out of a recession, they inflate the currency to get more money out there, so it's flowing more and there's more liquidity. But what ends up happening, like this last stimulus, is basically most of that money has been trapped in the banking system and on the stock market for the last 2 years. You're not seeing any of it in the real economy, but the bankers and the stock traders on Wall Street are happy, and so that they can claim that there was, that the economy came back last year somehow, that it's a double dip recession instead of being a depression. And then they even invented this weird term, jobless recovery. So it's like, it is magic, the thing is that it stopped working in 2008. And now basically the bubble has burst and everyone's sort of denying it. But it's like when Wile E. Coyote jumps off or walks off the edge of the cliff and he's standing there in midair and he doesn't realize until he looks down that he's just walked off the cliff, and that's when he starts falling. That's what's about to happen to us. Right. And it's already happening to Europe. They are saying that the euro, which is another fiat currency, another magical alchemical currency, is just going to be worth nothing. It's going to collapse within maybe a couple of weeks here. And that could create a ripple effect. It'll strengthen the dollar temporarily because we'll be able to take over we'll be the reserve currency of all those countries again, probably. But in the end, the same thing's going to happen to us. And there's a lot of theories about what's coming after that, some sort of global monetary system possibly.
Oh, that was a mouthful. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the next book. I was wondering while we were talking about the forefathers and Freemasonry, but I think we've already covered that. Here's a question I got for you before we move on to your next book. Was there any affiliation between the Rosicrucians and Freemasonry? Through that was Benjamin Franklin, interested in Rosicrucianism, free thinker, Freemason also?
Yeah, it was definitely grown out of the Masonic tradition and the Templar tradition. Rosicrucianism really is similar to the Priory of Zion, I think. It started out as a hoax and sort of became legitimate over time. But it was started by this guy that actually the Priory of Zion claims was one of their grandmasters, navigators, they call him. His name was Johann Valentin André. And it's very similar actually to the beginnings of Dagobert's Revenge. He printed this tract proclaiming that this organization existed, this brotherhood that was going to overthrow all of the thrones of Europe and the Catholic Church and create this sort of mystical new empire throughout Europe that was going to be how would you describe it? It's like the gnomes are going to be in charge. The wise men are going to guide us into a new age of enlightenment, But yeah, it was the symbols of Rosicrucianism. A lot of them are very similar to Masonic symbols. And in fact, there's a degree of the Rosy Cross in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. So they're sort of connected. They're almost the same. Sometimes Rosicrucian groups are in fact a Masonic group, and sometimes Masonic groups are in fact Rosicrucian. So definitely related.
Okay, now we can move on to the main, most exciting topic of today's interview, the book Mind-Controlled Sex Slaves and the CIA. which you wrote. When did you write this book?
Typical guy, you think that that's the most exciting thing. The mind-controlled sex slaves. Now we're getting into the interesting part. Yeah. Okay, so what was your question again?
Well, first question is, when did you write, and publish this book? And then tell us a little bit about it, please.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of the material came from research I did for an article I wrote for Hustler, and it was basically a lot of interviews that I did with people that claimed that they either were sex slaves for the CIA or had firsthand knowledge of it. So, how this works is, try to explain this. Okay. How it goes is that the CIA supposedly is running prostitutes to try to compromise politicians and businessmen, people in positions of power that they need to use for one reason or another. And they're choosing to send in people that they've mind controlled because it's easier to control the situation, and also that these people can give the perverted politicians and businessmen exactly what they want because they've been trained to do it exactly that way. They don't have any inhibitions like a normal prostitute might. So the theory is that these people are being mind controlled through rape and torture. There's something called trauma-based mind control. They
multiple personality disorder.
Yeah. I'm sure. Hey, your audience probably knows all about this. Really, they supposedly it started in Nazi Germany actually, and they say that it was discovered after we won the war. We went through their records and discovered all this sick research they had done into what happens when you subject a child to rape and torture at a very young age, and how it causes them to break down into multiple personalities that can then be programmed to do whatever you want. And sex slave is really only one incarnation of it. You could also use them for, to be a courier or to...
Tape recorder.
Yeah, and then as an assassin, some of the obvious things. And there's no reason why a person who's been mind controlled couldn't be used for all three. And some of these people claim that they were used for all three. So the people that I interviewed were Kathy O'Brien, someone who says that she was a presidential model. She said that she was sent in to service most of the presidents of the last several years. And she says that actually because of that, she was given some sort of vaccine that would prevent her from ever getting any sexually transmitted disease.
Like
so, right. So she couldn't pass that on to the important politicians. And she's got some really wild stories, and I found some of them really hard to believe. I also interviewed Noreen Gosh, who's the mother of a kidnapped child. It was a high-profile case in the 80s, and she says that she learned that he was kidnapped by this program. This program is called Project Monarch, supposedly, and it's an extension of MK Ultra, which was a mind control program for the CIA that they admit happened. It was really a bunch of different things. It was an umbrella over all of these different mind control experiments that they were doing. Some of them went beyond experiments. I think that they were operational. But, they were doing all sorts of things to people, as you probably know, with drugs and sleep deprivation, and they were doing this all on unwitting subjects, mostly people in mental hospitals and people in jail, other people who were vulnerable. And what I found in my research is that most of the people who appear to have been involved in this sex slave mind control operation, a lot of them were either from families where they were already being sexually abused, and they came into it supposedly because their parents were busted for abusing them, and then the corrupt rogue officials in the government co-opted them into this government sex abuse program. And then others were taken from orphanages and used. So again, we have, the most vulnerable members of society, people that no one really cares about. No family members are going to follow up on what happened to them, and
they've been abused, so they fit the profile too.
Right. I mean, that's something that I even remember in school. They tell you it's important to have good self-esteem and carry yourself as though you're confident and everything, because if you look vulnerable, then you're going to be attacked by a predator. And, people who have already been abused are more likely to be abused by a sexual deviant, including someone working for the government.
Well, that certainly makes sense, especially the part about sexual deviance in the government. Ha ha ha. That was supposed to be kind of a joke, I guess, but whatever. Anyways, here, Demi Diasis, you have something to add to this conversation.
Yeah, interestingly, the word or the phrase Project Monarch really can't be found in any official government documentation, and it wasn't really used until after 1990, when Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien used it in some documents that they had. Then all of a sudden it seemed like there was just a plethora of revelation as far as Project Monarch and stuff. And do you think there might be some cross-contamination? I believe in that there was a program that involved children to create multiple personality disorder and to program each of those personalities to do an assigned task or function. And like you said earlier, there were some sub-projects from MK Ultra that kind of fit this description. There were about 4 or 5. So what's your take on the whole Project Monarch phenomenon?
Yeah, I've basically come to the conclusion that it's probably a made-up term, that Kathy O'Brien injected this into the popular consciousness, and then other people sort of emulated her after that. I think I'll just say it. My opinion of Kathy O'Brien is that she's probably someone who is mentally unstable, maybe has been abused, and maybe with the encouragement of this Mark Phillips fellow who supposedly deprogrammed her and helped her write all of her books about her abuse. I think that she's very deluded. It's impossible to know what, if anything, of her story is true. And then all these other people that seem to have copied her. There's someone named Bryce Taylor, Cisco Wheeler. There's some others that tell a very similar story to hers, but there's no history of people telling stories really quite like that about being a presidential model or something called Project Monarch. Before that, it seems to have been something that was started by Kathy O'Brien, and then other deluded women with controlling boyfriends who help them write books have continued that tradition. And at this point, they all fight with each other and accuse each other of being, part of the Illuminati conspiracy. So it's hard to believe any of them. But just to answer your question as quickly as possible, I do think that there's a difference between Kathy O'Brien's wild stories and the underlying meat of this story, which is that, yes, there's government cooperation with organized crime, and the human trafficking trade is part of that. Sex slavery, child pornography, and prostitution. They are using those people to compromise politicians. And I think that they use children a lot, because if you got someone on camera doing it with a child, that's something that you can totally use against them. They'll always do what you say. They can't wiggle out of it like Bill Clinton did with Monica Lewinsky. I don't think that it's necessarily compromising enough anymore just to have someone on camera having sex with someone other than their wife. I think you've got to have them on camera doing something totally abhorrent to society and something very criminal. So I think that that's why they use kids a lot. And I think that there's really no explanation for how many kids are kidnapped and go missing, and most of them are killed, except that someone in a position of power is allowing this to happen. What I found was that the FBI does not really pursue any of these missing child cases, and they refuse to release statistics on how many reports they get. The Center for Missing and Exploiting Children has been trying to get them to release statistics for years, and they did it once really reluctantly, and they released just barely, just a little bit of information, nothing that could really be used. So I definitely think that there's a conspiracy going on here. It's hard to tell how many of the high-profile cases are real, but I think that if you're unfortunate enough to be in an orphanage, to be taken into foster care, the CPS, Child Protective Services, is totally corrupt. They've been accused and even caught in some cases of actually running a child human trafficking ring. That's the purpose of what they do, is to they take orders for children, and they seek out a child that they want to kidnap. Basically, they find some reason to take them away from the family, and then they're basically given as a foster child to someone that wants to have sex with them. So, okay, I'm going to stop talking now, but that's basically...
As you've been describing kind of an overall profile for who might be subjected to mind control and abuse, it makes me think of Charles Manson. He was an orphan. He grew up on the Boys Ranch, the famous Boys Ranch that they made that movie about in the 40s and stuff. And he's absolutely a mind-controlling predator. That's the MO that for him is so absolutely second nature. It's just who he is. So any connection, in your opinion, between Manson and any of these mind control victims?
Yeah, I think that the evidence is strong that when he was in Boys Town, which is one of these orphanages that's connected to this CIA mind control program, I think that he might have been subjected to stuff there. And he was at another mental facility, I believe it was called Vacaville, in California.
Another CIA mind control
institution. That's a place where it's been declassified that they were doing mind control experiments on unwitting subjects. He was also in and out of prison pretty much his whole life, and there's another vulnerable population. So I think it's totally possible that he was subjected to mind control, and then that may have given him the idea, really, about what to do with the family that he started. I think that, once you yourself are subjected to mind control, you may actually, get the idea to do it to someone else too. But I think Charles Manson is probably one of the unintended consequences of this. This is what I think, is that they did experiment with breaking people down through trauma-based mind control to try to create assassins and sex slaves. But the thing is, you don't know what's going to happen to a person after you do that to them. And they might go off and kill a bunch of people, and you didn't intend for that to happen. Yeah, I think that once you do that, you warp someone's mind like that, the chances of them becoming a sociopath serial killer is very high.
Mm-hmm. And there's a good book by Dave McCowan called Programmed to Kill, The Politics of Serial Murder. And he sort of kind of gives that outline in terms of the individuals that are involved in a lot of these serial killings or serial murders, and how they were institutionalized and how they fit that stereotypical type profile.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Demi de Assis. We can continue on. Well, actually, I'll ask you a question here, Tracy. You have a section in your book about Noreen Gosch, whose son was kidnapped, something that obviously any mother is going to be extremely traumatized about. And it turned into this whole kind of mind control story involving this male prostitute in Washington, D.C., Jeff Gannon, who was named a journalist, was kind of a journalist liaison for the White House, with no journalism background at all, really, except for a high school yearbook. I mean, that's just such a strange story that... What's your opinion about this whole matter?
Okay, well, basically, the story of Johnny Gosch is this paper boy who was kidnapped in the 80s and never seen again. No one really knows what happened to him, but his mother, sort of went on a crusade to find out what happened. She said she didn't get any cooperation from the police, and ended up being contacted by people that she was told were CIA agents and people who told her they were from the FBI. And then one real former FBI agent, Ted Gunderson, who I also interviewed for the book. Anyway, it seems like at some point she was turned on to the idea that he might have been a victim of this Project Monarch. I don't know if she even called it that, but or something similar to that. She basically became of the opinion that he'd been kidnapped by a government-sponsored child trafficking ring, and that he was being prostituted to politicians, and also used in satanic rituals, which is a aspect of the story that we really haven't discussed. But most of the stories about people who say that they've had this done to them said that satanic rituals were part of their victimization, that sometimes when they were being raped, it was part of a satanic ritual. And, I don't know entirely what to make of that, but I think it's possible that there's a connection there. It has to do with connections between the occult and mind control. Mind control is really like an occult process in a way. And there's a lot of confluence between government, especially intelligence, and secret societies. And some of them are pretty dark. Yeah, some of them are very into things that definitely seem like Satanism and conjuring demons and worshiping them and things like that. So I guess what I'm saying, basically, what I've discovered is that there's this milieu, this very dark milieu, where mafia, organized crime, people who are into having sex with children, and intelligence and occultism, all these people kind of are friends with each other and move in the same underworld. It's because it's the underworld that they all know each other, basically, I think. And anyway, that's what Noreen Gosh said, that she, was of the opinion, basically, that that's what had happened to her son. And then she told me in the interview that this suspicion was finally verified when he came back to her house one night as an adult, and he supposedly escaped from the cult, and told her all these stories about what had happened to him that matched what she had thought. And then he said, well, I'm on the run and I can't stay, so maybe someday I'll talk to you later. And he left, and she hasn't seen him since. And at the time I interviewed her in 2001, that was the rest of the story. And I thought that, her story might be plausible. I'm not about to automatically discount the story of someone who says their child was kidnapped. That gives her some level of credence where it's hard for me to understand why she would lie about it, So, sort of believed her in 2001. Time goes on, and some more weird things happen. You mentioned Jeff Gannon. Well, 2005, this incident with Jeff Gannon occurs, and just to remind the audience, basically this guy was asking George Bush questions in the White House press room that the other reporters thought were kind of softball leading questions, and then they realized that they didn't recognize this guy. And of course, they all know each other, so they're journalists, so they did some research and figured out, okay, this guy isn't much of a real journalist. I mean, he had a blog, but like you said, there's no real reason for him to be there. And then the other thing they discovered about him is naughty pictures of him on the internet as a military-themed male prostitute. And, so they embarrassed him publicly and accused George Bush of, setting this whole thing up. And then around the time this happens, Noreen Gosh does an interview for a newspaper in Utah, where, one of those alterna news weeklies, like Village Voice kind of, where she says that Jeff Gannon looks like the guy that visited her and claiming to be Johnny Gosh as an adult. And, I can see why in her mind it would all fit together if she really recognized him and thought, oh, that's the guy that came and visited me at my house. Then you put it all together, and it's kind of an interesting story. This kid gets kidnapped by this sex slave ring that we've described, and then ends up in the White House and has been a male prostitute, military themed, you know. It seems believable that if someone had gone through something like that, that's what they would turn into. Well, the thing is that Jeff Gannon is older than Johnny Gosch would be, and claims to be himself. That's not his real name. His real name's James Guckert. But, you know, he has a real life, and he says he's not Johnny Gosch, and there's no reason to disbelieve him. But interesting thing, after that article came out that Noreen Gosch was interviewed for in that newspaper in Utah, the newspaper went out of business within about 2 days and came back the next week with a different name, and they had fired all the staff. So they didn't like that they had published that article. Of course, that doesn't really prove anything, but it's just an interesting aspect to the story. So anyway, this thing with Jeff Gannon throws a bad light on Noreen Gosch, because you'd think that if this guy had visited you, that you would recognize him. And, you know, well, maybe he did. Maybe he's really an agent, and it really was Jeff Gannon that visited her, but he isn't really Johnny Gosch. I don't know. You'd have to go that far to believe that she's telling the truth. Well, now she says that she never even accused Jeff Gannon of being Johnny Gosch, even though for actually a year or so, she and Ted Gunderson were challenging him to present his DNA to prove he's not. So anyway, and then there's just one more thing that happened with Noreen Gosch that was sort of the nail in the coffin that made me think, okay, this poor woman is really insane. Is that someone sent her some pictures of her son, claiming that pictures of her son right after he was kidnapped, all tied up on a bed, and it looks like this sick, intro to a child porn S&M scene. But she went on television asking people to give her details about where the scene is from, if they recognize the house, anything like that, to try to track down who took the picture. And the public came forward, and they did figure out where the picture came from and who the child was in the picture, and it wasn't Johnny Gosch. And apparently it was all just play acting. Someone was pretending to tie someone up and took a picture of it. And someone was obviously having fun at Noreen Gosch's expense, sending her this picture. But the thing is, she believed it. She said, "That looks like my son." And that's kind of weird, because surely, even if she's forgotten what her son looks like after all these years, she's got pictures of him. Oh, yeah. What? I mean, I looked at pictures of Johnny Gosch and pictures of this kid, and I could tell it was not that kid.
Right.
So I don't know what to think of this woman. She's, obviously a victim, and I feel sorry for her, but, she seems kind of crazy. And it's sorry to say, we still don't know what happened to Johnny Gosch, and he may very well be part of this program. Who knows? But, I just don't know what to make of her. And Ted Gunderson, too. It's like, he keeps making claims that don't turn out to be true. He seems like a nut. I don't know what to make of this stuff. It's like researching it led me into this path where I discovered that, oh my God, there's all of this human trafficking going on, all this sex slavery, and the patrons of it seem to be rich people in positions of power, and they seem to have people in the government covering up for them. And that all seems to be real, and there may very well be connections to intelligence and mind control too. But as far as the people who have come forward claiming to have been victims of it, very few of them seem credible. The only ones that I still say seem kind of credible are the kids in the Franklin cover-up in Nebraska that testified and actually even got a settlement at one point. Paul Bonacci, who testified against Larry King and other people involved in abusing him in Nebraska, got a settlement at one point from a judge who believed him, but then another judge convicted him and some other of the kids making these accusations, convicted them of perjury, put them in jail, and, I still have no reason to disbelieve that they're telling the truth.
And several of those teenagers who became adults were actually either killed or supposedly committed suicide.
Right.
But the circumstances were really sketchy in at least two of the deaths, from my understanding.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the end that most of these children met. And I think that that's why the people that are coming forward with their books and their seminars are so unbelievable, is because, hey, you would be dead if this happened to you, probably, you know. As we all know, if a child goes missing for 72 hours, they're presumed dead. You know, that's usually what happens when people kidnap children. They have sex with them and they bury them in the backyard, or sell them off to some ring that, you know, makes snuff films out of them, passes them around, and then buries them in the backyard when they're done with them. The disturbing thing is to realize that that's happening on a really massive scale, and not a lot is being done about it. It's kind of hard to believe that something like that could go under the radar. But when I started looking into, especially things happening overseas in Europe and England, I was shocked to realize the level that it's going on at, and how people in society know about it, but they can't do anything about it because of the corruption. The thing is, the reason why there's so many stories to follow in Europe is because the press over there covers it, you know, and it becomes a scandal. There was a scandal in Portugal with a orphanage that was caught prostituting children to all the politicians in the area. And there was another one in Guernsey on the Channel Islands, similar situation. And in Northern Ireland, they actually convicted MI5 agents of doing this, of prostituting children so that they could compromise people and get them on camera having sex with children. I mean, you know, we're talking about things that are in the Guardian and the Times of London and mainstream newspapers. So it was shocking to me in my research to realize how much government corruption is allowing children to be prostituted and trafficked.
That's an excellent point. I mean, there's so much media cover-up that occurs through just not being willing to touch different subjects, and pressures that are put on journalists to censor themselves, that it becomes really hard to know what's real. But those examples of European child sex slave rings, that's alarming stuff.
Yes.
And we're getting towards the end of our interview. I'm going to pass the mic around, and everyone, that is Tracy Twyman and Demi Deassis and myself, Mr. E, we can all make parting comments and or any other points or interjections that we wish to make. So I'm going to hand the mic first to Demi Deassis, and then Tracy Twyman, and then I'll wrap things up. Here you go, Demi.
Yeah, Tracy, I really appreciate you bringing a lot of these topics out, and I found it really intriguing, very interesting. Are there any classes that you can take, like at a college, on some of these subjects? I think it'd be great if they offered them.
Actually, there's a guy in town here who teaches at Portland Community College that contacted me about, 6 or 8 months ago, and he has a writing 121 class, just like a remedial writing class that he teaches from the perspective of trying to introduce students to esoterica and conspiracies. And it's really, I'm shocked that this guy still has a job, but he's doing it. He makes these kids read books and write essays, so they're learning about reading and writing, but in the process, they're learning about all sorts of shocking revelations about hidden history. And, I think that's how it's got to be done, because there might be some novelty classes in some colleges about esoteric history, but, for the most part, there's certainly not a degree that you can get. And in fact, when I was in college, it was like, I got really good marks, but, I didn't get encouraged to pursue this angle at all, So, well, then again, I guess just my parting thought on that topic is that I think that modern education is a total scam. So I think that the best you can do if you really want to know about things is you got to educate yourself, read books, look at the internet, figure it out on your own, because there's, it's not worth your dollar, I don't think, to learn history or anything in college. If you want to go to college, learn some useful trade, but to pay someone to tell you what books to read, I think is pretty lame. Even though I went to college.
Well, interestingly, we all went to college here. Myself, Mr. E, Demi Deassis, you, Tracy Twyman, we all have degrees. Well, I was a older college student, and I sat in on classes when I was younger. Classics at Berkeley, world religions at Seattle University, ethnomusicology at the University of Washington. This is all before actually getting credit for college. So, I would have been glad to do that, but finally I just decided to go and get the piece of paper. So was it worth it? Because I'm very independent in creating my own ideas and projects, it was worth it. As far as looking at school in general, I have to view it as socialization of the masses. And so I want to see the kids having fun socializing with each other. And I hate to see the children who are outcasts and who this socializing environment just isn't any fun for. So, school has this interesting definition in my mind. I see it very much in a utilitarian way, and it's certainly not for just the goal of educating oneself, really. School, I guess in my viewpoint, that is in the viewpoint of Mr. E, the mystery man. School originally was made for the purpose, but this is a viewpoint of Buckminster Fuller's, and I agree with him that schools originally were made to give people specialized knowledge, but not overall understanding. If you give people components of knowledge, but don't let them see the overview of knowledge, then really they're compartmentalized, and whoever has that overview can control them more easily. So that's, I'm paraphrasing in my own words, but still that's the gist of the Fuller's idea about education. So I agree with that. And I'm really pleased to have met you today, Tracy Twyman. I've heard about you before through Demi Deassis, and now I'm meeting the real person. And Demi and I have had a very interesting adventure doing interviews and radio shows, and I've had a chance to meet some different conspiracy researchers and alternative history researchers, secret history researchers and writers, and these are always dynamic people who are fascinating for me. So I really appreciate it, Tracy. Good luck with your writing and research in the future. Thank you, Demi Deassis, for bringing me here. And this has really been an excellent interview. It's time to wrap things up, though, and roll on down the highway, as the old song goes, because we've got another interview to do later on today. So, on that note, this is Mr. E, once again saying over and out.
Welcome to Jesse War Radio. Jesse War Radio is available from jessewar.com. New episodes are posted every Friday. Please like us on Facebook at facebook.com/jessewar and follow us on Twitter @jessewar, all one word. If you enjoy Jesse War Radio, please consider pledging at patreon.com/jessewar. Thank you for tuning in.
Tracy R. Twyman is an American nonfiction author who writes about esoteric history. Her most well-known books include Clock Shavings, The Merovingian Mythos, Solomon's Treasure, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge, and her latest book is Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled, which we'll be discussing today. Without going further into summarizing today's interview, I'd just like to say that this has been one of the most in-depth and revealing interviews I've ever done, and it's one of the most informative. Tracy really spells out what she really thinks about world conspiracies, aside from giving an excellent overview of her entire book, Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled. So without further ado, let's start the interview. So we're here to discuss your book, Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled, which you just released recently. Is that correct?
Yeah, we released it, I would say, early November. And unfortunately, we noticed some major mistakes, printing errors, basically, in the first edition. So we had to pull it from the market for a little while and make a correction. And then the new edition just came out a couple weeks ago. So
cool.
It really hasn't been out very long at all.
Cool. Well, it's a good looking book, and the cover's really nice, and it has some good art in it. And then also there's some really great chapters. So I'd like to find out if it'd be possible maybe discuss all those chapters. Perhaps you could give us a little summary of each chapter or some certain chapters. And
Okay.
and then also the description on Amazon for the book, it has a lot of intriguing questions. So I'm wondering if we could just maybe start going over some of those.
Sure. That's a good idea.
So
All right.
so basically can you give us an overview of what the book's about first?
Well, it is about the subject of Baphomet, which is this idol that the Knights Templar were accused of worshiping in blasphemous ceremonies. And that was really their downfall after centuries of success and really dominating Europe and the world in a lot of ways. Their downfall came because they were accused of worshiping this idol. Not a lot really has ever been definitively known about this idol. And it really is kind of a mystery as far as what it really physically was, what the name Baphomet means, and what meaning it had to them. So it's just what I thought was a really intriguing historical mystery. And actually, as the book reveals, it kind of gets down to the deepest mysteries of existence. When we tie it into basically the story of the Garden of Eden and the origins of good and evil. So it turns out to be one of the biggest mysteries ever, and it actually no one had actually ever written a very comprehensive book on the subject before. So that's what we ended up doing, and I think we accomplished that.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting about. I've been looking at the range of books that you've written, and it seems like they really strike at the heart of sort of what we're talking about, occult, and then you could say conspiracy too, although that's a really loose term and a malign term, and then just esoteric subject matter that other people. I think it's not that other people don't take it seriously, but I think other people tend to rely on the irrational as opposed to actually sort of giving a historical, hopefully unbiased or as unbiased as possible account of what has actually gone on historically. And it seems like you're doing that. Is that how you see what you're doing?
Well, I think all along I've just I've been writing the books that I couldn't find on the shelves myself about subjects that interested me, really, pertaining to Western occult tradition. And, as I've studied that very broad subject with several different subcategories, I've found that there's some things that are just implied and omnipresent in a lot of these esoteric books of secret society mysteries and also in the mythologies of the world. There's these implied truths and connections between symbols that there seems to be at least a few categories where no one has written the book putting it all together yet. So that's what I started off with, the subject of the mythology surrounding the Merovingian bloodline in France, and the stories about the Holy Grail and the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. And I really kind of took that subject in the direction that I thought it needed to go, where there were lots of people writing books about really minute aspects of the mystery, and then lots of people just basing all of their inquiry on the assumption that the whole heart of the mythology and the symbolism is about Jesus and Mary Magdalene and a bloodline coming from them. And what I did when I approached that subject is I just, took it much further and in a more comprehensive way, connected it to deeper mysteries than that. And really, obviously, it's connected to the Holy Grail symbol, which, as it turns out, is sort of really a symbol for God and a symbol for the transcendental nature of God, the sort of contradictory nature of God, where God is the author of good and evil, and at the same time perceived as being overall good somehow. And that mystery of God is really what it turned out the Holy Grail symbol was about, and all of the symbolism surrounding this bloodline of the Holy Grail, as it's called, it connects to that, as it turns out. So wrote a book on that subject, and that's really how it all got started, because everything I've written since then has really built upon that framework. A lot of the conclusions that I came to during that research that I did have really tied into the other books that I've written. And this Baphomet symbolism, which really, again, is it's the same as the Holy Grail, really. As I said, it's this origin of the now dichotomous forces of good and evil, and the mystery of how those two are actually connected. That's really what the Baphomet symbolism is all about, and that has been at the crux of a lot of my investigations. And you'll find if you read through all of my books. So there's Merovingian Mythos, which is about Holy Grail and the bloodline. Then I wrote Solomon's Treasure, which is about the alchemical nature of economics and how modern economics is based on sort of a magical process of alchemy, and the symbolism of alchemy is throughout modern finance. Excuse me. So I wrote that book, and really one of the things I touched on very deeply there was this concept of Baphomet, and how it really relates to modern finance in a way which it can very much be traced back to some of the innovations that were brought forward by the Templars. They were associated with the origins of banking and checking. They invented a system that, in a lot of ways, was the origin of the checking system we use today. And obviously, Freemasonry came out of Templars, and the Freemasons had a lot to do with really the creation of the United States, which it has also really influenced and obviously had a sort of hegemonic role in directing what currently international finance system. All these things are connected, and what we find when we look at the origin of it historically, the Templars, is that they were obsessed with this principle of Baphomet, and it really, if you take seriously what was said about Baphomet by later authors, occult authors like Eliphas Levi, the Baphomet is really the same power that is alluded to in the alchemical texts, where they talk about the power that can transform lead into gold, the power that can make a magical transformation happen. Levi and other authors have said that power is really Baphomet. So it seems like Baphomet is really connected to the mysteries of modern finance and the mysteries of alchemy. So I wrote 2 books about that subject, and had to deal with the subject of Baphomet in those books as well. And it was only natural, really, that I would eventually have to write a book all about Baphomet. But it took a really long time. I've been working on it for about 7 or 8 years, and it's such a big subject that I ended up having to get someone to help me, because I really couldn't even mentally hold all of the ideas in my own head when I was trying to analyze it, trying to organize all the stuff in the book. I was overwhelmed, and eventually I met Alex Rivera online, who's a writer on Gnostic subjects, and has this website called aeoni.com, or I think maybe the Aeoni. At any rate, he joined me and finally helped me complete it. After 6 or 7 years of struggling with it, after joining forces with him, was able to finally finish it in the space of a year. So, but it turned out, as you saw, to be very, very long. It's over 600 pages long, but that's really what we needed in order to cover the subject. So, and I think we did it well.
And did you encounter any kind of resistance to writing this book or any of your other books?
You mean from the world?
Yeah, I mean, just from any kind of people, or just kind of any kind of forces or anything like that.
Well, the subject with Baphomet and my researches into it has always been sort of guided by Baphomet himself in a way. And I addressed this in my introduction to the Baphomet book. My previous book talks all about it. The book that came out in 2014 was called Clock Shavings, and that was a memoir. And that was all about my experiences on the Ouija board, which, it was started out as sort of a lark and something I was doing for fun. And, I ended up being in contact with Baphomet, and it was something that he chose. I wasn't really thinking about Baphomet at the time. I had my mind on other things, but Baphomet contacted me, and I really formed sort of a long-term relationship with this entity, where I got quite a lot of leads, I would say, on the research I was doing. And that's mainly what we were talking about, what the seances were all about, was just try to get some insight into the esoteric mysteries that we were researching, me and the friends I was connected with at the time. So, I found that to be, I know that's kind of a weird subject, but that is, something that I've done. It's part of my experience, and definitely something that's influenced me.
Well, no,
I would say that.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, to me, it sounds like you're balancing the irrational with the rational, which is really the right way to approach this subject, I think.
Well, that is, in a way, that's again another one of those dichotomies that is embodied in the symbolism of Baphomet himself. And that really comes across in the conversations I had with him on the Ouija board, where yes, he's capable of being rational, but there's also a sort of psychopathic irrationality to him sometimes in the way that he speaks. You can tell he's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, So anyway, I always sort of could tell from those conversations that the mystery of Baphomet himself is a really deep mystery, and something that I felt personally qualified to write about in a way that I don't think very many people are. And I even though I think that lots of magicians and other types of people who are involved with invisible forces, I think a lot of them have dealt with Baphomet. But I don't know if many of them have had the sort of personal conversations we've had, and I don't know. I felt like I knew him better than almost anyone. And so I felt really qualified to write this book, and have been struggling for years to try to put into words the understanding that I had in my mind about it, and also just struggling to trying to figure out how it all works in history. Like what is the origin of this idea? Obviously the word seems to have its origin with the Templars, but where did it come out of, basically, and what did they really think about the meaning of this entity that they were involved in?
Yeah. Let's go. You've already brushed upon these subjects, but you mentioned Clock Shavings, which is, so you're saying that was your memoirs relating to your own experience with Baphomet, and also probably the beginning of your study for this book. And then also, so these are, so is it possible we could probably go through some of these chapter titles? I'm wondering. And
sure.
Okay. So it starts off with, after the preface, it starts off with chapter 1, Pacts with the Devil. So does that involve the Templars?
Yeah, that's obviously to introduce the subject, you have to first talk about what is historically known about Baphomet, and what the Templars actually said about him, or what was ever actually proven about him. So that chapter, I think, in a way that no other book has, lays out exactly what the Templars were accused of, and then what they actually confessed to. And yes, to summarize it, it definitely was a pact with the devil in a way. And in fact, everything that we think of about the practice of Satanism, the sorts of rituals that Satanists might be involved in, it all seems to be based on the confessions of the Templars. So, in a way, what they were doing is the origin of what a lot of heavy metal fans today and rebellious teenagers are doing now in homage to Satan. So anyway, but what I think is important about that chapter is, again, laying out specifically what the Templars did confess to, because there has been, in relatively recent years, in the last 20 years, revelations supposedly coming from the Vatican that have, changed the way that authors write about this subject. So it used to be sort of a question mark about whether these confessions were real, or were they just basically being tortured by the King of France's police and justice system. And was it just basically the torture that made them confess to these things? Were they false accusations, in other words? And everyone has always acted like that was just a mystery. And in fact, most people have assumed that, it was probably all made up. They probably just confessed to whatever they had to say in order to make the torture stop. But in recent years, there's been this revelation of a document supposedly found accidentally in the Vatican archives, where it's claimed in this document that the Pope had his own investigation that he did that did not involve torture, and he obtained similar confessions. So they confessed to it a second time, not under torture. And what they confessed to, they did confess to a system of homosexuality in the order. So they would tell them that when you join the order, you take sort of a vow of chastity, but that's really about not having sex with women. And if you feel like you're tempted to have sex, then it's better to do it with your brothers than to give in to a woman, and that would somehow lower your spiritual strongholds or something. It would be tainting to be involved with a woman, but it's okay if you do it with a man. So they would literally have a vow you would take where you would promise that if your brothers asked to have sex with you, you would give into it. And that if you had a sexual urge, you would do it with your brothers instead of with a woman. So that in itself, the fact that they confessed to that is twice, is kind of shocking in the context of what has been written about the Templars so far, which is almost always sort of apologetic. Almost always, from the point of view that these are trumped up charges. They never actually did this stuff.
Right, and that's probably because the Freemasons tend to want to defend the Knights Templars as their predecessor, sort of.
Exactly. You know what? That's a good point, because, most of the books that are really written about this subject, a lot of times it turns out that the authors are Masons themselves. And, that's why they have a sympathetic point of view towards the order and always wanting to sort of clean up the image of the Templar order. So, and interestingly, you get the same attitude now from the Vatican, because it's the whole way that this document was rolled out. And I think they said they found it in 2001. It wasn't until many years later that they finally revealed it.
What was the name of that document?
It's called the Chinon Parchment.
Okay, right.
And this woman, Barbara Frail, who works for the Vatican, is the one who said she found it. And then she went on to write a book explaining what was in it. But it took a while before that book came out. The first book that came out was published by the Vatican in Italian. And it was like printed with special leather binding and weird leather straps on it to make it look all fancy. And it cost $9,000, and there were only a few copies printed. So it was like, for years, no one really actually read the thing, but there were all these articles that were printed about it in the news. When they unveiled it, it was a news story. They unveiled it to coincide with the anniversary of the arrest of the Templars. So, it's a publicity stunt, the way they revealed this information. And part of the way the way the headlines were written said that this document proves that the Templars were exonerated. Every single article you read about this says that. And it's because they're inferring that based on the way that Barbara Frail, working for the Vatican, promoted her book. The things that she said in her book and the promotional material that came out implied that it was somehow exonerating the Templars. But it's actually the exact opposite. And when you read her book, the English version that came out years later, you realize that, no, it didn't exonerate them at all. They did all these things, including part of their initiation ritual, as they confessed, denying Christ, spitting on the cross, and then all of the homosexual acts, as I mentioned. Part of the initiation, they confessed again a second time, kissing on the buttocks, that they had to kiss their Grand Master's butt when they were being initiated. And then sometimes they would have to kiss his penis too. Okay. And in her book, she even documents that a lot of the Templar initiates were quite young too. And one was even 11 years old. So think about that. And so all of this is true. They confessed to this twice. The only, what she meant, and she allowed it to be deliberately misconstrued. What she meant when she said they were exonerated is that the Pope absolved them. And that's all it was he heard their confessions and then he gave them absolution.
Oh,
that
so
does not mean
that doesn't preclude them having been exiled from France, etc.
Right, exactly. No, all the justice that happened to them later was from France, from French government. But the Vatican is putting this out, saying, well, the situation wasn't as bad as Prince Philip tried to make it look, or King Philip tried to make it look, and that they even had, again, sort of an apologetic explanation for this, that these were all just tests to see how loyal the people were going to be, and they didn't really mean it. In other words, it's just sort of a hazing ritual, and that's somehow supposed to make it better. When if you know any Catholic today and you tell them, how would you like to join an organization where you have to spit on the cross and kiss someone's penis and deny your belief in God and Christ? Well, they're going to say, no way. That's one of the worst things you could do. God might not ever forgive you for that. That's what most Christians believe. But the Vatican is saying that their own, chartered holy order, their warriors in the crusade, we're doing that, but it's no big deal.
Right. Yeah. Have you found any evidence connecting the Templars to the Jesuits by any chance?
I haven't really explored that angle of it yet. That would be interesting because I'm learning a little bit more about the Jesuits myself from another angle. But no, I don't have anything to say.
Well, because you mentioned that the current Vatican is sympathetic with the Templars, which seems surprising. And then, but if the current Vatican is Jesuit, which it is, it seems to be, right? Then why wouldn't they be sympathetic with the Templars, especially if they're Freemasonic?
I'm not really sure what the motivation here is. I think that will reveal itself in time. But they're definitely trying to portray that the Templars that they were somehow wrongly maligned by the King of France, and trying to portray also that they tried to contain the situation. The Pope tried to save them, basically tried to save them from being executed, and failed. And the way they tell the whole story, it's the King of France was so powerful in Europe at that time, more powerful than the Vatican, or I don't even think the Vatican existed, but more powerful than the papacy, because actually it had been moved to France at that time. And they're portraying the church at that time as impotent and powerless, and the pawns of the French king. And it's a way, I think, of apologizing for themselves and their role in everything. I mean, because the Templars came out of the church. And so whatever they did and whatever their legacy is historically, which appears to be Freemasonry, the Vatican or the Church really is the origin of it in some ways, you know.
Yeah, that's really telling,
it's
isn't it? It seems really telling, you know, that they're apologizing for the Templars out of all the people that they could, you know, apologize for. And then another question I had is, you mentioned homosexuality. So with the seal of the Templars, with the two knights on the same horse, do you think that that's what that means?
I think that's quite possible that it was alluding to that. Yes. And there's a lot of other alleged Templar symbolism that really depicts quite a lot of sexual debauchery in the context of rituals. So that's another thing that we get into in that chapter, and then actually it's a thread running throughout the entire book, is that one of the most important texts in the development of the historical understanding of Baphomet and the Templars is this book that was written in Latin in the 1800s by a Viennese Orientalist, as they called them. And he wrote this book called Mysterium Baphometis Raveletum. In fact, it's more of like a chapter in another book. So it's really it's not an entire book, but it's about 70 pages of material. And Eliphas Levi and who really had a lot to do with the modern understanding of Baphomet. He's the one that drew the image that everyone thinks of now when they think of Baphomet, of a goat-headed human, a male with breasts and a goat head. Eliphas Levi's understanding of Baphomet was largely informed by this book. In fact, everything that has been written about Baphomet is largely influenced by this book. But I would say after the 1800s, after the late 1800s, people stopped actually reading it. I would say probably fewer and fewer people were understanding Latin and just didn't bother to actually read it. And no one did an English translation of it. So this book was talked about by people writing about Baphomet, but the people writing about it almost never had actually read it. And we finally tracked it down and had it translated. This book, the guy who wrote it claimed to have found in all of these properties, these churches and things that were on former Templar properties. He said that he found all of these relics that proved that the Templars were doing these blasphemous and debaucherous rituals. And in this book, he has all of these images, which are line drawings that he's done of the things that he found. And a lot of them are in Austria, some in Germany, some in France. But they actually, a lot of them have common elements that make them look really like they're from the same artist in some ways. And definitely a lot of common symbolism. And he said that, he thought that these artifacts were from the Templars. And when his book came out, some people took him seriously. A lot of people didn't believe the conclusions he had come to. So they either thought that the artifacts weren't, that he wrongly identified them as coming from the Templars, or some people thought that it was all sort of a hoax and a conspiracy, that the artifacts had been made up, physically created in contemporary times.
What century was that?
Was being made up.
What century did that come out?
1800s. So early 1800s.
So before Eliphas Levi.
Right before him.
Oh, all right.
So, so this would have been a book that had come out 10 or 20 years earlier. Actually, about 10 years earlier. 10 years earlier than Eliphas Levi's first book about the subject, I think. And I'm going off memory here. I need to be able to consult my own book because I have the exact dates in there, but I don't have the book on.
Well, back to the Chinon parchment. I mean, do you suspect that it might be not real? I mean, it seems just so coincidental that they would release something at such an auspicious time for them to do so. And then, why would they if this woman's a librarian or whatever, why would they let her just publish something that should be kept secret, supposedly, right?
Well, they did actually keep it secret for I think it came the first book that they published about it and the announcement. I think that was 2011. So it was like 10 years that they kept the secret.
Okay.
And again, I need to. I hope my dates are right. I need my book in front of me. But anyway, there were several years between the time that she found it and the time that they published the book about it, and then there were several more years before an English translation of her book came out. Or I think actually she wrote a second book that was longer, and then they finally published that in all different languages and stuff. But they did try to keep it under wraps, it seemed, for a while. But here's the thing. Here's what we found in our investigation is that so many of the important documents that reveal stuff supposedly about the Templars, real secrets about the Templars. The alleged origin of these documents is over and over again someone stumbling across it in a library, either in the Vatican or more often even in the private libraries of Masonic lodges. So a Mason will supposedly find a text in his lodge's library and then write a book about it, or publish something about it, and
Right.
That's how everyone knows about it. So we examined several of these in the book, and every single one of them, I question the authenticity of it. I mean, definitely, this is one of the many historical subjects I've looked at where I don't necessarily believe anything. And I think that so much of history can be made up and no one would know any better. So I don't necessarily believe any of this. It's all coming out of secret societies. This is a secret society subject. And it's entirely possible that it's all self-referential and it's all stuff they made up and they're the ones talking about it. It's important to them and it has no meaning beyond that. That's entirely possible.
But then it might have a kernel of truth as well, right?
Well, I think Okay, one of the things about all these organizations, they sort of put themselves forward as the repositors of the mysteries of the universe, but I think they're also trying to figure it out too. They're doing the same thing I'm doing. I mean, I'm just putting together symbols and connections that I see and trying to then speculate on what it might mean.
Yeah, but that's the only thing you can do. That's the only thing you can do with this type of literature because it's like a minefield.
Oh yes. Yeah, and I wonder too. Yeah, if I would say Baphomet is like in a way the quintessential mystery of Freemasonry, and I think that it's one of those things that none of them really understand. I'm not claiming that I totally understand it either. I think it's one of those deep mysteries. But I also I think the relationship the Templars had with this entity, it was their patron. They talked to this head during their rituals. The head would talk back to them and give them wisdom, and it had this magical ability to create riches. And it really, I think, probably was the origin of all of their ideas. So the way that they organized themselves, the approaches that they took to business, and the approaches that they took to battles and politics, and the way that they managed to become so dominant in Europe and elsewhere, and in the Holy Land. I think this is the irrational part of me, where I believe in magic and superstition and the supernatural. I think that, they probably were talking to an entity the same way that I was able to talk to an entity, and that entity gave them information that enabled them to dominate, to do all these things.
And what information do you think that was, Tracy? What information do you think that was?
Well, like I said, I know, I only know the parts that I can understand. So, you can tell that this method of setting up an economic system where people deposit their wealth with you and your organization, and then you give them credit based on that. And then you can actually issue credit to other people based on that wealth that's deposited with you as well. And therefore you have all these people owing you money, but you only have the original money that was given to you in the first place by the depositors. That's this credit system that they invented. And that is what is that's the dominating influence on Earth today. That's the system we're all trapped in. And part of the problem we're seeing the whole thing unravel now is that there's so many debts created based on only a few assets, and you can weave very complex webs and create very vast empires based on that, but eventually it will all collapse, I think, and we're seeing that now.
Because people stop believing.
Right? Yeah, it's a system based on magic, basically, where people believe that the piece of paper has the same value as the money that they deposited. Some actual asset with real wealth, and but they believe in the magic of the credit, and so as long as they keep believing, it will they can keep trading those bits of credit around with each other. Everyone thinks it has some kind of value, but once you start to think that, maybe there aren't enough jobs for all the people on Earth, there's too many debts, no one can ever pay them. When you start to think that way, then that's what actually happens. So
that's I had like a revelation about that the other day. It's just basically the bank is the collective. So we're the bank, sort of, because we all believe in this myth, of the paper that you mentioned.
Yeah, and something like that, I mean, it almost requires magic, and some sort of master magician at the helm, because you need someone to, keep weaving the spell. And but the way that gives you power, obviously, is you're the one holding the real wealth. So the more people give you their stuff in exchange for the credit, the better off you are. Even if your system collapses, you still have all the goods. So that's the sort of thing I think the Templars were poised to do. They wanted to rule the world. One of the popes even wrote something about that several years later. Actually, it was in the 1800s. One of those popes wrote something about the Templars, and he said they created themselves with the purpose of taking over the world. And, they were on their way to doing that, I think. And so, even though the King of France may be no saint, I think that in a way he might have slowed down at least the progress of a organization that had its intention to dominate and subdue the rest of the world.
Well,
but
the big
happened anyway, I guess.
The big contention is, of course, what role do the Jews play in this? And people will constantly blame the Jews for like the conspiracy of Jewish world domination, but it seems like to whatever extent certain Jewish people might be involved in this globalization, global conspiracy, Zionism, etc. It seems like there are other entities involved as well, and those are the ones that people really can't put their fingers on. So I think that the Jews may be used as scapegoats. So what have you thought about that? I mean, just candidly, what have you thought about all that?
Candidly, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I don't know exactly, and I think that people are either arrogant or perhaps too politically correct if they want to say that they absolutely know for certain that's not the case. I'm going to say I don't know. Or even if people say that they do know, that's arrogance too. You don't know really what is this entity called Jews. That's something debatable, what it means. And as far as, who these people are that seem to be in control, are they all one type of person? And does this label apply to them? Does that somehow reflect upon everyone who calls themselves a Jew? I think these are all questions. Mainly, I just don't look at it through that lens. It's just annoying. It's like you can't. That topic introduces irrationality into the conversation. I think, you just ended up stumbling all over yourself, kind of like I'm doing right now.
Right, because you
It's
can't
like,
pin it down because we don't actually know. That's the problem. And it's like people will put you into a corner if you don't say, "Oh, yes, it's the Jews," or they'll put you in a corner if you don't agree with Alex Jones or whatever, saying it's the satanic death cults or it's the Vatican or whatever. But the fact is do we have any evidence to actually prove who is actually pulling these strings? You know?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the closest I came in terms of my personal understanding is just to realize that there are these intelligences that you can't see most of the time, but certain people can communicate with them. And the kind of interaction I had with the spirits I talked to made me realize how conspiracies could happen and how cults operate and how those things work together. So, you can imagine if you join a secret society and, first it's doing rituals and you're hanging out with your friends and it's just a club and it's fun. And maybe you think that there's some mysterious, mystery information that they can give you, kind of like the Rosicrucians, they teach you how to meditate and stuff like that. You're moving along, you're having fun in the organization, and then finally you get to the point where you realize that one of the head of your order and the inner circle of your order, they're actually talking to some kind of intelligence, some spirit that's more than human, and the effect that would have on a person when they realize this thing that they're in is actually being directed by another intelligence. It's going to be either, validating. In other words, they all of a sudden believe that they're involved in something really important, or they're going to reject it and be scared. But for the people that stay, it's kind of like a cult. So, they're going to be true believers, and they're going to go along with whatever the cult, intends for them to do. So, I think that is really key. Okay, I don't know if it's the Jews, if the Jews are part of a larger group, or if it's some subset of Jews, or this is just the richest people in the world, whoever they happen to be, whatever race they happen to be. But what I do think is that there's someone orchestrating this from a perspective that we can't see. So, I assume it's some kind of higher dimension that they're in, or lower dimension. I'm not sure, but they're in some sort of space that we can't see, but they're here and they can see us from a different perspective, and that's how they're able to give information to people that we otherwise wouldn't be able to obtain. And if you have someone like that on your side giving you directions, telling you how to run a business and how to run a military operation, it makes sense to me that that's how the Templars could have gained the power that they had. And by extension, that's how any group of people could gain power. And so, the question that you're asking, I honestly don't know. I mean, the other day I was reading how supposedly the Rothschilds have more wealth than anyone on the Forbes list, but they're not on the Forbes list for some reason. And, that caused me to wonder, well, how many other people aren't on the list? And, how much wealth do they have? And what if that's not being counted? And, there's actually numbers that supposedly calculate how much money there is in the world at any given moment. What if a large amount of money and wealth just isn't being counted? So who runs the world then? Are we just sort of in a game being run by other people, and there's a much larger world beyond us? Much more money, much more resources, much more land. Who knows? I mean, something like that can be hidden from you. It just makes you wonder, what else is being hidden from you? So as far as who's in control, it's so far beyond us right now. I don't think anyone can honestly say who it is. And these people that go around counting all of the Jews and saying who has a Jewish name or a Jewish nose, uh, I don't think they're helping anyone, and they're just really entertaining themselves and making themselves very unlikable. But I don't think it's all that useful.
It's skirting around the issue, just like paying attention to politics.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, exactly. I mean, what could be more useless than getting involved with left or right politics when you know that that is just a game and there's something else much bigger going on beyond that. And what you find nonetheless, like if you have a bunch of friends on Facebook like I do, you get to see what people are thinking all the time. You just read your feed and you can see what's going on. These people who have interest in conspiracies and they believe that there's this higher elite controlling everything. Nonetheless, somehow every 4 years they get sucked in
Yeah.
to caring about this left or right stuff. It's weird. It's like you'd think if they really thought the political process was important, wouldn't they be doing that all the time? Wouldn't they be involved in local politics? No, they only care about the presidential election. And it's like they can not think about it for 3 years, and then all of a sudden they get sucked right back in.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's just a puppet show every time, especially now,
Yeah. So, I think, go ahead.
Well, the concept of the scapegoat is what leads me to believe that that might be the role of the Jews, to be a scapegoat. And then if that's the case, and if the Jews are the bankers for some richer, more powerful group or entity, then what is that group or entity? In other words, who chooses the chosen? That's the question, But
there was a really good book that was written about that actually one time called The Myth of Jewish Evil, and the author was Hiram Maccabee. And he he wasn't exactly saying what you're saying, but similar, how the symbolism of the Jew in Europe has always coincided really with the symbolism of the scapegoat, and really the biblical definition of a scapegoat. And that the symbolism of Judas Iscariot has always been associated with the symbol of the Jew. In other words, Judas plays the role of the Jew in that story, and that's the sort of association people were intended to make between Judas and Jews. So yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like they know that someone's going to have some sort of innate understanding of what's going on, that there's an elite controlling them, that they're enslaved somehow, and that there's really they're living really in a fake reality and a much broader reality beyond that. People are going to have that sort of inclination and understanding. So they put this really simplistic, easy to understand narrative in front of you to glom onto, so that you feel like you understand what's going on once you buy into the Jew conspiracy or whatever.
Yeah, and why wouldn't they set something like that up? And why wouldn't it be encoded in scripture for millennia,
Yeah, and it's whatever you want to call Jews. I mean, I think the word just comes from the tribe of Judah, really. So the whole story of the Bible up until the sons of Isaac doesn't involve Jews per se, but a lot of people associate the whole thing with Judaism and consider the stories in the Bible like Genesis to be a Jewish story. But obviously, just by definition, it has to be something deeper than that, because according to the Bible's own narrative, Jews didn't exist until later in the story. So the whole what we consider the Judeo-Christian mythos is actually much broader than that. It's really our mythology. It belongs to us. It's not something foreign. So I think that again, it's a way of separating people from keeping them from having a deeper understanding. So yeah. I try to avoid that stuff.
Yeah, no, I know. I just think that maybe it does need to be addressed now. And the thing is, I don't have a motive for protecting the Jews from if obviously there are a lot of Jews that are complicit with the system as it stands, right? The Bakey system, etc. But I still have never been convinced that they're the ones completely in charge, as a group or whatever. So that's the question that I have. That's why I'm asking you, that.
What are the different theories that people have? You mentioned this other thing which you considered separate, that there's a satanic conspiracy.
And Vatican as well, yeah.
As far as I can tell, that's kind of true. I mean, that's just my experience personally. My experience talking to the spirits, that's what it seems like. Yes, it's a satanic conspiracy. And as far as my research into the Templars, which, as we've just covered, Freemasons came from them. Freemasons certainly, had their own conspiracy for world domination going for a while. Even if they're not in control now, they had a lot to do with building the structures that we have now. So all this stuff comes out of the Templars, and hell yeah, it was a satanic conspiracy. That's what they were doing. They are the authors of Satanism. That came out of them. So I would say that's probably a more accurate way of putting it. Now, that doesn't make me happy because I don't want to be one of those people either,
Right.
I mean, that's really some of the worst YouTube videos in the world are made by people who believe in the satanic conspiracy and the Illuminati, and all the rappers are making the
exactly
signals.
They water it down. But I mean, that's why I'm appreciating your willingness to even discuss this, but that's the funny thing, is that nobody actually wants to discuss this. Nobody's actually saying, well, wait a second, we need to question the truth movement as well. The truth movement that says that it's the Jews, and then they list all these Jews after Jew after Jew, and it's like, well, okay, that's fine, but like, is this really identifying the power structure here?
Well, okay, and then here's a question. If it is a satanic conspiracy, in other words, all these people seem to be involved in, covert belief systems, rituals, and groups that are somehow or another covertly giving homage to Satan. But at the same time, they land on that list that you're talking about of Jews. What does that mean about Judaism? Or if you were to believe that, which I don't, but are we saying that Judaism is a satanic religion? And in that case, if you were to believe that, which a lot of people do, you see plenty of that on the internet. If that's true, then what is supposedly good? Now, I found some of these people. There's churches operating now. They have presence on the web where they have their own theology about how Jesus is good, Christians are good, and that's somehow all separate from Judaism, and Judaism is satanic. So, that's a belief system that exists, and I've been able to follow those people down their own rabbit hole somewhat. I've watched some of their videos, try to follow what they're thinking. But it's really, it doesn't seem very historical to me. In other words, they're really just sort of stretching it to try to somehow remove Christianity from its Judaic roots. I think it has roots that are obviously beyond that, or other influences coming from outside Judaism. Christianity is a different thing for sure, but there's no way that you could separate it from its Jewish influence either. So.
Right, like Mithraism, yeah.
Yeah. Christianity is a syncretic religion. Obviously, I mean, it's a belief system based on a bunch of different strands of influence, and so all of these people, all of these belief systems, all of these religions and groups of conspiracy believers. What do you find that they're always fighting with each other? They're always accusing each other of being shills and agents and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
I just I think, since we're asking questions like this, I'll just come out and say that I have no idea what is real, and I think that an honest person would have to say the same, that so much of your reality can be manipulated from the outside. Everything from your understanding of history and current events to even, a lot of people are questioning the shape of the globe, or if there is a globe right now, and is there outer space, and are we in a simulation, whether they think it's maybe a computer simulation like the Matrix, or the Gnostics, and we talk about this a lot in the book, the Gnostic point of view. They keep describing entities creating small universes within larger ones in a series, so that we're in like a stacking doll system, like the Russian dolls. Any of those things I think could be true, and it's like if I were to try to promote one of those belief systems exclusively and only research that one viewpoint, I think, you're just deluding yourself, because you just don't have the perspective you need to figure out, for one thing, what kind of system are you in, and then who's running the system. I don't know. So really, just to get back to the Baphomet subject, in a way, this is connected to that. Like, you don't know who God is and what God's relationship to the devil is. And, maybe they're friends, really, or maybe it's a complicated situation. Maybe there's no straightforward answer. Maybe they've had a complicated relationship throughout time. And that's what it seems from analyzing all the myths and legends that are connected, that we connect in the book. It does seem like that's really that's the heart of the mystery of Baphomet. Is in a way he's the devil, and yet he's a sort of a copy of the mind of God in a way, because he contains the good and the evil within himself, just like you would imagine God's own mind somehow contains those things as well. So I think that the study of the Baphomet subject, which is very complicated for that very reason, kind of prepares your mind too for accepting the fact that you may be in a totally different reality than what you see in front of your eyes, and who are the villains and who are the heroes in this story. I don't think you could possibly know.
That's a really good way of putting it. And but we'll still get people saying, trying to force us into a corner and say it's the Jews, stupid. You know what I mean? You've heard that expression. But I don't necessarily think that it is possible to actually discern what's going on. And I think that you're doing probably the closest thing to actually discovering what's actually going on, as you just elucidated right now. So I really appreciate that.
About the videos that you did?
Yeah, please do. Absolutely. Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, what does that tell you? What the proposal that you put forward in those videos that nuclear weapons are fake. Now, you were basing that on observations of the film footage from the tests, right?
That and intuition, and also kind of an analysis of like the Oppenheimer statements, and just all the general kind of mythos surrounding all the nuclear mythology. It just snapped in my head. I just thought, wait a second,
Okay, so around the time that I saw your videos, which coincidentally, I think it's weird. Okay, I had never heard of you before you contacted me a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, for an interview. But I had about a year and a half ago seen this video of yours, about the nuclear weapons.
Nucleized.
It was all part.
Yeah.
Nucleized. It was all part of a investigation I was doing at the time into this way of thinking where people are questioning nuclear science, not only the weapons, but just the whole model of the atom and the subatomic particles supposedly in it, that so many resources are invested in supposedly pursuing this line of science. Obviously everyone in school is learning it, and yet there's people that question it. And so I was learning about that stuff about a year and a half ago, And I just thought it was interesting that you contacted me, and I'm not saying that obviously I don't know a lot of what's going on. So the fact that I didn't recognize your name doesn't mean you're not famous. It just means that I'm out of it, right?
What is fame anymore?
But
Everybody's famous on Google now. We all have our little knowledge graphs, don't we?
exactly. So, but I thought it was amazing. I was just getting back into thinking about this stuff really after ignoring it for a while when you contacted me. So, one of the other things I watched around that same time was this lecture by a guy who was saying the atom essentially doesn't exist. I mean, the atom is the smallest particle there is, and there's nothing inside of it. And I'm simplifying what he was saying, but he gave a hour and a half long lecture about it, and I thought it was very interesting. And then I ended up finding some modern people, because that was like in the 50s, I think this guy was giving this lecture. Then I found some modern people who were specifically arguing about the expenditure of money that's happening at CERN right now, and how they think the whole thing is bullshit, and that they're just spending money, and then they come out with these reports about what they supposedly saw, and that they're not really doing what they say they're doing, because in his mind, it was not possible. And really, what I gathered from all of these lectures that I saw was that really physics, especially physics of things that you can't really see, and that is quantum physics, and then even astrophysics. Suppose we're getting all of our information from these probes, supposedly, and then it turns out a lot of that stuff is really artists putting together stuff supposedly based on data, but not actually a photograph. So it just seems like everything really that we know about science is just someone building a model to explain some data, and you could build a different model to explain the same data, and present either one of them to someone and tell them this is the world you live in, and they would believe either one of them, whichever one they were taught first. That's what they would believe. And I think that's kind of the case. I don't think they know much, especially about the subatomic particles. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't have lots of data, but again, they're sort of trying to put some sort of sense or order over it. And every time they build a model, they look harder, and they find that, oh well, that model doesn't explain this, this, and this. It's like me, because I'm not any kind of math genius. When I try to do a Rubik's Cube, I'm playing with it, and I think I'm getting somewhere because I got all the red ones on one side. And then I look, and the other sides are totally messed up. So I haven't really gotten anywhere. But, for a minute, I thought that I did. And that's what I think a lot of science is, and also political science, where people are trying to figure out, what the system is.
And economics, yeah.
Yes.
It sounds like alchemy.
We were talking about how someone has a formula for how much money there is in the world, but it's kind of like quantum physics. Like, it's always changing so fast that the number isn't really real. It's once you come up with a number, it's actually different. That's the number of what it was 40 minutes ago, not now. In fact, they have 3 different numbers, because like one's the amount of there's M1, M2, and M3. So one's the amount of cash, and one's the amount of credit. And then I think another one is like derivatives and stuff like that. So an even broader system of credit.
Well, I have a theory I'd like to share with you. I've long had this kind of maxim, or whatever it is. It's that an atom is a solar system, infinity in both directions. That's my theory on it, and I've long held that. Just to share that with you.
No, I've thought that myself, and I wondered if our solar system is an atom in someone else's world. That's possible.
So let's skip ahead to chapter 2. We've discussed chapter 1, and chapter 2 is Seed of the Serpent. So what is that about?
Well, that's when we really get into sort of the meaning of Baphomet, and what I was talking about the unity of good and evil that he seems to represent. And again, I'm using the word he just sort of as a placeholder term. It's really a hermaphroditic being. The Eliphas Levi depicted him that way, and that is, in fact, the origin of it. Because what it seems to me is that the Baphomet spirit is based on this creature that, according to Kabbalistic legend, existed in the Garden of Eden before Adam and Eve. And in a way, Adam and Eve are sort of a product of it as well. But the Kabbalistic stories talk about this creature that they call the other god or the beast, and that it's hermaphroditic. The male side is this demon called Samael, and the female side is a demoness called Lilith. And they are equated also with Leviathan, or with a similarly hermaphroditic being called either you could refer to it as Leviathan in total, or another way of looking at it, according to these Kabbalist legends, is the male side of it is Behemoth, the female side of it is Leviathan. Basically, again, symbolized always as a serpent or dragon, some sort of reptilian giant monster, basically, that is hermaphroditic. And they talk about how he, the male side, seduced Eve in the garden, and so that their encounter with the serpent in the Garden of Eden is really an encounter with this creature. And their sexual experiences that they had initially in the garden were with this creatures, and then it was only afterwards that Adam and Eve bred with each other, and had their own children. But some of the legends actually say that Cain was the son of this serpent having sex with Eve. So, and then there's other Kabbalistic legends too, talking about Adam and Eve originally being one hermaphroditic being too, and that they were split apart. And that was part of the fall, really, was them splitting apart. So it's all very complicated, because we're talking about something that really, it's a legend, but it's, our best way, I think, of trying to tell the story of what happened here. It's kind of the beginning of creation, because they tell the whole story about the creation of the earth, and describing it as coming out of nothing. But then, very quickly in Genesis, you get to the details of what's going on supposedly in this garden, as they describe it, on earth. So I don't know what the garden was. I mean, these are all metaphors for something. It's some kind of enclosure where the elements of creation were worked with, and part of, in order to to create something, first you have something that's sort of a simple energy, I guess, is probably what it was, and it was worked over until it became creation. And part of the process involved the splitting apart from something that was a unified force into two opposing forces. And that is remembered as these hermaphroditic beings being split apart. Now, the story of Adam and Eve being split apart, this is actually in Genesis. There's actually two creation stories. So they tell the story of Adam and Eve, and it really kind of describes them as being one thing. And then the story is told over again in the next chapter, where they're more seen like more autonomous beings. And first it says that she's brought out of his rib, but other than that, the whole hermaphroditic aspect of them is kind of ignored in the second telling in Genesis of the creation of man. But as far as this other being, Lilith, the whole, I think the first telling of creation that makes man and woman seem to be one entity, I think that sort of alludes to the existence of this Lilith Samael figure. But the real detail of it is told more in extra biblical texts and Kabbalist texts and things like that, where they talk about this being. This is Satan, right? This is the serpent, but it's a lot more detail into Satan than most people will give you. You know, most people when they think of Satan, it's really sort of a very simple thing. I think this is a more detailed look at this spirit, and you know, that one of the interesting things is the description of how that serpent was split apart. So the story goes that God split them apart so that they couldn't be united, and specifically so that they couldn't breed. Somehow that prevented them from breeding. And but they're always trying to get back together and so that they can have sex and breed. You know, that's their motivation. But the story is that God separated them and stopped them from breeding to save the universe somehow. That if they kept breeding, it would annihilate the universe, and if they're allowed to ever unite again, it will annihilate the universe. So that's sort of the story about Samael and Lilith, and that chapter explores that topic, and then as we go throughout the book, we'll return to it again and really connect it to the rituals that the Knights Templar were doing.
Okay.
A lot of it having to do with Gnosticism or influenced by Gnostic beliefs and rituals. But it seemed to me, especially if you take seriously the drawings that were published by Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall in that book that I mentioned in the previous hour, the Latin book, Mysterium Baphometus Revelatum. He shows all these images from rituals that they were doing, supposedly, sex rituals and things like that. And some of them involve this serpent. You can see her in the trees. There's a depiction of the Garden of Eden in one of these pictures. And then, like I said, all of these interesting sex rituals involving bestiality and homosexuality. And I think really that the Templars, of course, were accused of doing things like this, and they confessed to some of it. It seems to me that some of the sex rituals that were done by Templars, then later done by witchcraft cults, and other secret societies that do sex rituals, and before that there were the certain Gnostic sects that were accused of doing similar sex rituals. It seems to me that it's really about channeling these spirits and allowing them to have unity through the bodies of the participants. So according to the Kabbalistic stories, like I said, Lilith and Samael can't unite sexually, but they have this intermediary that they use called Tananiver. That they just describe it as an intermediary somehow. This allows them to have some kind of semblance of sex. You know, it's like a virtual reality suit or something. When I first heard about it, I thought it was like a dildo or something, but and then I thought about it more, and I thought, well, no, it's like a VR suit. And then I thought, well, actually, it's like being, you know, a person being possessed, and the spirits get to have sex with each other through the bodies of the people who are possessed. And the more I looked at that angle, and the more I found that, you know, that's in fact explicitly what is said about what is being done in a lot of sex rituals, even old, you know, pagan rituals where they would sort of invoke, you know, the spirit of the sun or the moon, and have sex in order to supposedly create fertility in the land and things like that. Well, again, you know, you have the description of someone being possessed and letting the spirits have sex through them. So this is kind of what I think might be going on in some of these rituals. And I think they might be motivated by their contact with these spirits, and the spirits are actually telling them to do this. So, you know, that, I guess that's kind of what we get into in that chapter, is all about the origin of the mythology of a serpent or a Satan figure that's actually hermaphroditic. And also when we talk about the seed of the serpent, we're talking about the idea that there's a bloodline coming from this, that these creatures actually bred with humans. And that is part of the whole mythology of Lilith, is that because she misses her sex partner, and, you know, she is longing all the time for that. She unites with human men instead, and supposedly comes to them in their dreams. And so if you have a wet dream at night, it's really supposedly Lilith visiting you at night. And all these stories of incubuses and succubuses are connected to this idea that these spirits will visit people at night to have sex with them. And specifically with Lilith, there are these stories that she did this with several important people in the early chapters of the Torah. That several of the main characters really in the Bible are descendants of Lilith, and including some of the children of Solomon and people in his family. So there's a story about a demon called Asmodeus, who's, according to the Kabbalists, either the son or brother of Samael and Lilith. He's directly, in the family line there. And Asmodeus, there's a story that he took over Solomon's throne at one point and pretended to be Solomon, and Solomon was exiled somewhere else while this demon reigned in his stead. And really, I think that's a myth alluding to the fact that there are, people in what is supposedly a history, there in the Bible, that are the story about them is that they're part demon. They're part they're heirs to Lilith. So what it seems like is that Lilith, if you were to take these stories seriously, she's trying to put her own bloodline into that line of inheritance that you see coming from Adam and supposedly going all the way through the patriarchs of the Bible, through David and Solomon, going all the way to Jesus ultimately. So it goes along with the idea that the devil felt usurped by man, and in the Quran they talk about this, that God asked Satan to bow down to man, and he refused. He thought it's wrong to bow down to anything other than God, and that man was less than him, and so why should he have to bow down to man? And really, the Quran says that this is the origin of the whole problem between God and Satan, is this conflict over the love of man and giving homage to mankind. And it really, the devil felt like something that was his possession, his inheritance, was given to man when man was given this creation. So the attempt by the spirits connected to Samael and Lilith to incarnate in these human bodies, specifically these people that are inheritors of this divine lineage going back to Adam. It's a way of trying to put their own children in line for those thrones, the thrones of the earth, really. And then this connects with the conspiracy of the Templars that came later.
I actually made a video called The Sacred Hermaphrodite, and I believe that they actually worship a sacred hermaphrodite. Do you think that that's the same thing as what you're talking about?
Yes. What do you mean by they? Who?
These people, the Merovingians, the people who are in charge, the people we don't know who they are.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, yes. I think that this spirit that we identify in the book is Baphomet, and that is talked about in these Kabbalistic legends. Again, I said they called him the other god or the great beast. Obviously, that's the same as the dragon in Revelation. But they're talking about him as being so monolithic. The only thing that could possibly be bigger than him really is God. And in a way, he's like a little version of God. And yet he's the devil. Yes, this is, I think, about as high as you can get almost when you're exploring these spiritual realms. So I think that these people who are involved in these most powerful secret societies, the ones that are actually talking to the patrons of their orders and, actually doing deals with invisible spirits. I think a lot of them are talking to this creature that we're talking about. And yeah, you can call him Baphomet. You could call him it's definitely a hermaphrodite. So yeah, I keep saying him, and it's almost it's confusing because it's definitely a hermaphroditic being, and really it's almost like these things. He's just one of perhaps perhaps several beings that are from a realm where sex differences don't apply. The way they describe the Garden of Eden, it seems like it's an encapsulated place, and then or Adam and Eve were kicked out of that and into some larger space, but still, I think we're enclosed somehow in, a broader reality than what we can see. And I think what we know here is normal, which is, the passage of time linearly and breeding sexually between two different beings that are different, sexually different but compatible. I think that's that's the product and the earmark of the reality that we're in. But there's other stuff beyond that. So when you touch something beyond that, when you speak to something that's beyond that, you're going to perceive it as being hermaphroditic. That's one of the first things you're going to notice is they have the elements of both male and female within themselves. Because here it's normal for those things to be separate, but over there it's not.
Well, actually, can I ask you actually a personal question? Because first of all, I've always actually felt like I had a balance in between the genders spiritually. I don't know how to explain that further, but I've always just kind of known that. I mean, like, have you known anybody? Do you feel like that yourself by any chance, or have you known anybody that's said that to you?
Oh, sure. And, I think that's really a product of spiritual progress or even just intellectual progress, knowing yourself, getting to know, having a deeper understanding of the world and reality is, obviously, you can see from the way that fetuses develop that, the sex differences appear over time. So you obviously are something else before that happens to you.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it's fake or something. But I'm not going to say it's not real. But in order to have a deeper understanding of yourself, I think, and also other living beings, and even perhaps non-living beings, you have to realize that sexuality is just an attribute. It's not the real person inside. And
right.
I think it's really also it's a product of time and space. This is what I was about to get at. The story of the Garden of Eden is the story of our reality coalescing into what it is from something else. So it came from something that was, to our perception, transcendental, something, a seed that contained all of the possibilities of what would eventually be created. But it had to fall apart. That egg had to crack open, and all of the things it contained had to separate from each other, and that includes all of these polarities, such as male and female, and that the knowledge that Adam and Eve came to, that's given to them by the serpent in the garden, was carnal knowledge. That's the knowledge of sexuality and generation. And generation can only happen over time. And so that's why the story is so confused, and why it's really hard to tell what happened in the garden in a linear fashion. It's like they had the knowledge, and then all of a sudden they fell. The reality around them changed. All of a sudden, Eve is pregnant. They don't actually describe the sex. What happened there? Well, it all happened all at the same time, and all in the same instant. Time was created and sex was created at the same time, because it's all connected. You can't have one without the other, really. So that's what I think. We're living in a world that's defined by time and the divisions of sex. But what we came from didn't have that. And that's where I think the Gnostic stories are very informative, because all of the archons in Gnosticism, which are basically the beings that created the world that we're in, they're all hermaphroditic.
Are they?
And yes, and the aeons that they create, it's interesting, their description of aeons, like they create aeons, which are like universes, but they also are described as being hermaphroditic. It's like they're alive, and they have the attributes of both sex. And it's only when you get into the present aeon that we're in, which is considered a fallen one, that you get these sexual divisions and time and space as we know it. So that and of course I'm generalizing here because there were a lot of different Gnostic sects and beliefs, but these are some of the commonalities between most of them.
Well, then I might not be wrong for calling my God the sacred hermaphrodite, which I've been doing for years now, and haven't told too many people that, but okay. So what about the Nephilim? Because people will obviously want to see how that connects to what you're talking about.
Well, it's totally connected. I mean, the serpent is just in that particular version of the story. It's described as being one character. And then, the Nephilim. Okay, so yes, I was saying that the story about the serpent is really just a version of the story where the Nephilim are all identified as one character. He represents a larger subject too, a larger group of beings. So, like I was saying, I think that in the earliest stories in the Bible, so everything that's going on in Genesis, a lot of it is just retelling the same thing in different ways. So like the story of creation, the story of the flood, the story of the Tower of Babel, and then this story of the Nephilim is sort of just dealt with very briefly in actual Genesis, right before the flood. I mean, it says that the flood was caused by God deliberately to cleanse the earth of these hybrid creatures that were born from angels that decided. Well, actually, it doesn't even go into that much detail in Genesis. It just says the sons of God united with humans, and there was these giants that came from that, and they were rapacious and consumed too many resources, and so he decided to cleanse the earth of them. And really, is the story of the Garden of Eden is just that same story, but in very, very shortened and with single characters representing large groups of people. So Adam and Eve, that's humanity, and the serpent, that's this other race of beings, with whatever they are. And just the meaning of the myth is that you have one being or set of beings that for whatever reason chose to illuminate humanity with some sort of knowledge about what God was creating, I guess.
Right.
But at the same time is plotting against us in a way. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So let's push on to the next chapter, the goat-faced wild man. What's that about?
Okay, well, that and also the following chapter. These are really
the three Hermeses is this following chapter. Okay.
Right. So those two chapters we're really dealing with the myth of Hermes and the myths of half goat entities. And I'm talking about myths from all over the world, and how that influenced the eventual I guess mythology or the perception of Baphomet. So actually that first chapter, the goat-faced wild man, is really, it's about Pan and Hermes and these goat-faced figures in mythology.
There was Bis in Egypt, right? Bess?
Which one?
B-I-S or something, yeah.
Yeah, that's another one. So there's several things that these characters, a lot of them have in common. So you've got, on the one hand, they are teachers, and in fact, often the authors of the inventors of writing. So you've got Thoth in Egypt, and Mercury or Hermes in the Western world, and okay, then the Babylonians have Nebu, and I don't know. There were several of them in the chapter that we. And then another important character to point out is Enoch, called Idris by the Muslims, really often connected with Hermes. All these characters associated with like I said, writing, the origin of writing, teaching mankind not only writing but also just philosophy and thinking and science. These characters are often thought of as basically the primordial and quintessential teacher from the gods to humanity. And yet at the same time, they will also be associated with this sort of idea of wildness. They're like outcasts, kind of like the scapegoat symbolism. They somehow come from outside of our world. They represent some sort of wilderness, depicted as someone who lives in the wilderness and only visits occasionally. The Pan in particular is associated with sort of insanity. That when you encounter Pan, he will drive you crazy, but at the same time enlighten you with some sort of transcendental knowledge. And I guess the purpose of that chapter is to point out that this is a archetype that it seems to have influenced the trappings that are surrounding the image of Baphomet. That it's a wild figure associated with fertility, also, and debaucherous sex rituals, and yet at the same time, it's a teaching entity.
Okay.
And so that's what we deal with in that chapter, and then
moving on to Divine Knowledge, chapter 5.
Sure. Well, then that's mainly about the Gnostic stories that we were talking about. So, giving sort of the history of Gnosticism, explaining the worldview that those groups seem to have held, and how that would connect with the development of the idea of Baphomet, because it does seem that the Templars were initiated to some extent in some of the mysteries of Gnosticism. And then the chapter that comes right after that, Head of Prophecy, is all about John the Baptist, who is considered really the progenitor in a lot of ways of Gnosticism. A lot of people consider the Gospel of John to be a Gnostic text. And it's also considered, it's possible that if John the Baptist himself didn't write it, someone who was part of his cult did.
Why is that? Why is that, and what is the significance of it? Because John the Baptist is obviously the most intriguing figure in Christianity, really.
Well, and he connects with this archetype that we were talking about of a teacher in the wilderness. So, I mean, that's literally what he was described as.
Right.
And wearing, furs and basically eating locusts and living out in the wilderness. But he was also kind of, a crazed prophet. He would have these visions and, was trying to teach people what was going on the way he saw it. But he, in a way, he seems to be kind of a nut, kind of a crazy person. I mean, I'm not putting him down, but I'm just saying that that's sort of personality that and the archetype that he embodied. But he had this cult, and the cult existed before Jesus's group did. And in fact, it made a bigger impact on history, really, at least at the time, because we have, records of John the Baptist and his influence, contemporary records that we don't have of Jesus.
Oh, interesting, really?
Yeah. I mean, Josephus talks about John the Baptist. He doesn't talk about Jesus. But so John had these interesting people who were members of his group. And these people went on to found Gnostic cults. One of them was Simon Magus, who is, villainized in Christianity. He's viewed as this a person. Actually, the word simony comes from this character, Simon Magus. He's a person who tried to purchase the gifts of the Holy Spirit and then was rejected, by the apostles, and ended up founding his own cult. But non-Christians, or people, I guess, who are more in, Western occult tradition, look to Simon Magus as sort of a father figure, and he's viewed as really the founder of Gnosticism. And then he had a student called Dositheus, I think, and that person went on to found Gnostic groups also. So you can trace the lineage of Gnosticism really through Simon Magus and then back to John the Baptist. And what another thing that connects obviously with the subject of Baphomet is that the actual idol that the Templars worshipped was a severed head, a skull, and sometimes described as actually a mummified head, so it might have still had the skin on it. And some of the theories about which head it was, a lot of them, people theorized that it was actually the head of John the Baptist. Now, there were several relics, and there still are 3 at least, and historically there have been more than that, relics that are said to be that of John the Baptist, John's head. And actually, crusading knights were responsible for at least 2 of those heads being found and placed where they are now. So the Templars were involved in the trade of relics. And it's entirely possible that they came across something that they believed was the head of John the Baptist. And there's a tradition, actually, in Egyptian magic that if you have the head of a prophet, then you can, turn it into a slave to you, basically. You can make that prophet's spirit be imprisoned inside of the head and then force it to give you information and do things for you. So, our theory was, well, maybe that's what was done with John's head, and then eventually that magical relic ended up in the hands of the Templars, and they used it. Because the story of John the Baptist in the Bible is, that this political enemy basically had his head decapitated, and then they put it on a charger on a plate.
Was it not Salome in the Bible? Salome that had, yeah. So that's the occult explanation for the Salome myth then, or story.
Right. Yeah, so it was Salome, and her daughter Herodias was the dancer. Salome was the one who wanted the head. And there's really no explanation given about why she wanted it presented that way specifically. I mean, you just assume, well, she hated him and she wanted to be given the head so that she could, feel like she had victory over this person. But I'm thinking more that it was used for a magical purpose. Actually, the family that she came from, the Herod family, they had converted to Judaism recently, and had been forced to convert. But their heritage was in magic and paganism. So I think it's entirely possible that she was, aware of how to use a severed head. They're actually called teraphs in the Bible. And this is, or teraphim is the plural. This is something that there's several traditions about in the Middle East, several stories that you can find relating to this subject, that you can use a severed head for divination. And you embalm it, and then you put magical curses on a parchment or something and shove it inside of the head's mouth, and then it will start prophesying for you. And that's exactly what the Baphomet head is described as. So that's kind of what I think it was. I don't know if it was John's head or not, but I think it's entirely possible. It would go along with the mythology that that we have surrounding Baphomet, really.
Yeah, and
it would also explain why John is, John is a patron to the Templars and also to the Freemasons.
Oh, really? Yeah. And why did Salome make love to the head? Right? She supposedly made, or to his dead body or something.
I'm not familiar with that one. No, she her daughter did some kind of dance, sexy dance in front of the king, and then demanded that, well, he was so pleased about her sexy dance that he promised he would do anything for her. And then she, being prompted by her mother, asked for John the Baptist's head. And then it just says, it doesn't go into any detail really about the presentation of the head or anything, but she specifically asked for the head to be placed on a charger. And that's where the story ends in scripture. So it doesn't say that what was done with the head afterwards.
Oh,
but
okay. Because
it on a charger to me seems like what they used to do with these Teraf heads, where they would mount it on some kind of plaque and then put it on the wall.
oh, right. I'm mixing up Salome by Oscar Wilde with what you're talking about from the biblical account. So, okay. So let's move on to the baptism of wisdom, chapter 7.
All right, so this is where I really analyze and speculate about what was the so-called baptism of wisdom. This is the probably most common and best etymological breakdown of the meaning of the word Baphomet, that it means baptism of wisdom. And this goes along with rituals that have been done by Gnostic groups and proto-Gnostic groups. So the John the Baptist followers actually, they practiced baptism, and they were part of basically a wisdom mystery cult. So it seems like the word could even be applied to the types of baptisms that John was doing. But long before that, there was this group called, not necessarily before that, but there's this group called the Sabians from Iraq, and these people also practice something that they call that translates essentially to baptism of wisdom, or immersion in the divine mystery. And so you have several different traditions of people going through baptism rituals and associating that with obtaining wisdom. And in fact, the immersion in water itself connects to this idea, because chaos and wisdom both are represented as water in a variety of different mythological systems. It's very, very common, the idea that creation came out of chaos, but that chaos is represented as water, and then also that it contains wisdom, and getting to know the chaos that creation came from is obtaining wisdom. And I think that's kind of what the Templars were doing also. I think they had a darker version of the baptism than what was being practiced by some of these other groups. Another very overt reference to something similar to that seems like the baptism of wisdom is in the Corpus Hermeticum, where Hermes is instructing one of his students, and he tells him that God put wisdom in a bowl, and instead of giving it to everyone, he just put it in a bowl, and then he brought that bowl down from heaven and made everyone compete for access to the bowl of wisdom. And then not everyone even tried to have access to the bowl of wisdom. Only those that were brave enough would access the bowl of wisdom and submerge themselves in it. And he instructed his student that if he felt like he had the strong enough constitution to withstand the immersion in the wisdom, then he should try it. That basically the idea is that somehow this is going to tear you apart, but if you think that you can put yourself back together, once you get out of the immersion into wisdom, then you'll be made a stronger person by doing that. So so that definitely seems to me to be, I think that they're describing very well what the baptism of wisdom is at core. It's some sort of contact with the chaos and the wisdom that exists out there beyond our current reality that we came from. And I think these serpent creatures, like the Samael Lilith creature that I was talking about before, Baphomet, I think they represent a point of contact from that other side, from the chaos that we came from. They possess the wisdom of that chaos, and if you contact them, you can be immersed in that as well and obtain that wisdom as well. Now, the Templars and what they were doing, I specifically think that involved sexual rituals and blasphemous rituals. And I'm taking that from their confessions, from the traditions that supposedly came out of Templarism afterwards, so analyzing Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism and even, the OTO and all the Aleister Crowley people and the kind of stuff that they do. It seems like the Templars were most likely doing sex rituals as part of the baptism of wisdom, and that they were actually, like I said before, conjuring and then being possessed by these spirits from the chaos realm, and then having sex with each other so that the spirits they're possessed by could have sex with each other. And what is the purpose of this? What was the purpose of this? I think they felt that it empowered them. And also, I specifically think that it was a ritual to supposedly bring down creation in a way, or at least the creation that we're in. And this, you kind of have to read the book to follow it, but I'll just go ahead and spoil it a little bit. Basically, I'm decoding these images that Hammer Purgstall found on the alleged Templar properties in Europe. And it seems like one of them, one of the recurring images is of a woman that he thinks is Baphomet, because she also has male genitals and a beard in a lot of the pictures. And she's pulling down the sun and the moon and the stars from chains that are dangling from the sky. She's pulling on these chains, and the sun and the moon are coming down. They're upside down. They're on their way down. I think that, if you look at the world the way that ancient man did, and even, in Templar times, he still really kind of looked at the world this way, that, they're on an Earth being that the planets are, orbiting around us. I don't even think they thought of them as planets in outer space the way we do now. They just thought there were these lights in the sky. There are these layers. There's several heavens, and each planet is, the ruler of one of those heavens. So what we call orbits, they describe them as being different layers of existence, different realms, and that there's a firmament separating us from all of that, and we're encapsulated in this little petri dish kind of, and so the idea of bringing down the heavens, for one thing, it seemed a lot more possible back then, because they were thinking about a much smaller universe than what we think of. And for another thing, why would they be interested in doing that? Well, if they are practicing Gnostic rituals, which there's quite a lot of evidence they were, most of the Gnostic sects really had an anti-creationist perspective. So they saw the God that created us as being a villain, and the world we're in as a prison, and the archons were the planets that I just described. Those planets were thought of as being rulers that were keeping us imprisoned, and the chains are the chains connecting us to them. The planets rule our fate, and so they control us. We're enchained by them. And what this image is that I'm describing from the Templar properties is someone, specifically this Baphomet character, taking the chains off and then using the chains to pull those archons, those planets, directly down from the heavens and dethrone them. And so I think that the Templars were sympathetic to that point of view. They maybe thought that they were in contact with someone that was going to dethrone God and, set himself up as the new God, and, that would somehow benefit them by serving him.
Wow. So
you go ahead. Yeah.
That also sounds like Kundalini yoga as well, bringing down from the 1,000-petaled lotus via the chakras into the lumbar chakra or something like that, pulling energy down. And then also the Kabbalistic tree of life sounds similar to what you're describing as well.
Yes, and actually, a lot of detail corresponds here with Golden Dawn rituals, because if you read the literature that goes along with the Golden Dawn rituals that explains not only the rituals themselves but the meaning behind them. They go through this pantomime of reliving what happened supposedly in the Garden of Eden, and they describe this what they call supernal Eden. Is basically that they have this tree of life that's, I guess, the creation that we're in, being supported on the shoulders of Adam and Eve. They're like holding the whole thing up. And then they tell this story about how Eve bent down to pick something up, and that caused the whole thing to collapse. All of the stuff that was riding on her shoulders collapsed, and that was the fall from Eden. And then it has something to do with a serpent also coming up from the bottom.
Is that the ritual they call a 5 = 6, where they initiate the people in Golden Dawn?
I can't remember which ritual it is exactly, and actually I read through a series of them. So, and they all kind of go together. Yeah. So I don't remember exactly which ritual I'm talking about right now, but the story I remember, the story that's told, and it's that the tree had sort of collapsed, the structure on her shoulders had collapsed, and then the serpent was coming up from below to try to swallow and infiltrate Eden, which is kind of the thing at the top. I guess that's where God lives. And so in order to save the most sacred part of Eden, God walled off the supernal Eden from everything else. So it corresponds to in Genesis, they talk about right after Eve ate the apple, God kicked them out of Eden and surrounded it with what he called a flaming sword. And in this Golden Dawn story, they're describing that most of Eden was walled off from this inner sacred core called the supernal Eden, and that was to protect it from the serpent. So,
well, that sounds good. It sounds like maybe there's still Eden left then.
Yes, exactly. But there's this idea that there's this part that the bad guys are always trying to penetrate. Oh. And that would go along with the story in the Tower of Babel, right? Someone's trying to build a tower that's high enough to storm heaven. In other words, right, if you were to view us as being in some sort of encapsulated system, and there's some reality beyond this that we can't see, those guys were trying to build a tower big enough to pierce the top and see what was actually going on outside of us.
And hence they were punished by God.
Exactly. But yeah, so I forgot where we were going with
this.
Well,
let's move on. Let's move on to chapter 8, Abraxas, Secret of the Temple.
Okay, so that is all about Abraxas. Is this? It's a Gnostic entity and idea. It's sort of a later Gnostic entity and idea, and it comes from a tradition that's really syncretistic. So it's not from any particular pure Gnostic sect. It's influenced by a lot of other Egyptian magic traditions and things like that. Abraxas is in a way very similar to Baphomet. The symbolism is almost identical in a lot of ways. It's a creature that embodies good and evil, creation and destruction. It's depicted as being chimera-like, just like Baphomet is both goat and human. This Abraxas has serpent legs, a human torso, and then a chicken head. And it was also used really for protection. Like people would wear an image of Abraxas as sort of a magical amulet of protection. The idea is that this creature is something that even the demons are afraid of. Just like gargoyles would be used in churches. An image of something really scary is used to scare away all of the other scary things. So Abraxas is associated with protection and magical transformation, and the unity of polarities, just like Baphomet.
And is
And,
that's the secret of the temple?
Well, here's why. Because there's actually coins that were minted by the Templars that have Abraxas on them, and they say in Latin around them, "Secret of the Temple." And actually, when I say coins, here's what I mean. They were seals. So they would use these like notaries seal documents. They would use these to seal letters and things, treaties and correspondences between them and other groups or other people. So these things, there at least 3 of them have been found. One of them is in the British Museum. One of them is in the French National Archives. And they're similar. You can tell that several of these existed at the time. So
yeah, I'm looking at pictures right now, and it has what you said. It has snakes for legs. It has 2 legs, and then it has some sort of bird as the head. And then
it's a chicken.
And you said it's a chicken, isn't it? And you said it's a chimera, right? It's a composite god, and then it has a man's body, right?
Yeah, it has a male torso that's kind of in armor, like it's a soldier or something, and then it has a whip. It's always holding a scourge. So, and it goes along with the idea that it's a protector, that you would invoke this entity for protection. So, here's what we think. For one thing, this is evidence. Irrefutable evidence that the Templars knew about Gnosticism and ritual magic, because that's what Abraxas was a symbol of. At contemporary with the Templars, there's no way it would have had any other meaning. And it's weird that they use this, actually, that they might have sealed documents that they communicated with the church or the assassins or a king or a prince or something. They'd seal a document with a picture of Abraxas. It's kind of strange, but it certainly proves that they were influenced by Gnosticism. And also, I think that they were involved with ritual magic. I think that Abraxas is also another way of representing the same concept as Baphomet. So it's just like an indirect way of paying homage to the patron of their order by using a symbol of something else that represents the same thing. And then we think also that this spirit might have actually been to them an entity protecting their temple. And then this is something that we get into with the rest of the book. The next chapter's the last chapter, called Riding the Goat.
Riding the Goat current, right?
Right, but and that's sort of a chapter. It has its own purpose, but it also kind of summarizes the rest of the book too. But one of the things we got into here at the end that, is really too much of a subject to explore in this book, but it's what is Solomon's Temple? I mean, this is that the Templars named themselves after, and supposedly it's because they were there on the site of what used to be Solomon's Temple. That was where their headquarters was. So the exoteric story is that's why they named themselves that. But there's a lot of confusion about what that might mean. One of the reasons is because there's really no physical evidence of Solomon's Temple. There are no foundations to be found that actually correspond to that time period.
What about the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall?
Well, that's the later temple.
Oh, right.
So, so we have evidence of these other temples that were supposedly built to replace Solomon's Temple, but we've not found the actual Solomon's Temple. And so, lots of people have speculated about what this means. One angle, which I wrote about extensively, there's this guy, you may have heard of him, calling himself Prince Michael of Albany.
No.
He claims to be the rightful king of Scotland.
Okay.
But he's a Freemason and is part of some kind of Neo-Templar order too. But anyway, so one of his most recent books is about a document he supposedly found, in the library of his Masonic lodge. And this document supposedly said that the Templars made a secret mission to Mecca and that they found Solomon's Temple there. And the rest of it is a lot about how a lot of the early Templars were influenced by Sufi Islam and were from Islamic families. So that's an interesting detail too, and that's I got into that subject a little bit. But as far as Solomon's Temple, I think it's interesting, the idea that maybe it was in Mecca. I'm really thinking it's not as simple as that. I think there's some meaning behind the idea of combining both Solomon's Temple and the Kaaba in Mecca. Both of those things seemed almost like mirror images of each other. And the Kaaba in Mecca is associated with a black stone, and the Solomon's Temple supposedly rests on a stone also, or did allegedly rest on a stone.
And those stones are meteorites, right? They're betalises. Meteorites,
right. Well,
yeah.
Okay. For sure, the one in Mecca is thought to be a meteorite. The one in Solomon in Jerusalem, the mosque that is there right now. Actually, not the mosque, but there's some other structure. I don't know. It's kind of confusing because I haven't actually been there, and there's like 3 different buildings that are on essentially, the same plot of land here, and that used to be Solomon's Temple. And so one of them is a mosque, and the other 2 aren't. But at any rate, there's a building built over this what's called the foundation stone, and the story around it is that this is the first spot of creation, that everything else was built out from there. That's the navel of the world right there, and that if you drill down beneath it, you'll get into the waters beneath the earth that supposedly the flood came from, and then below that is the underworld. So anyway, I think that it's interesting. Like, there's this story about Muhammad supposedly going to sleep with his head on the stone at the Kaaba, and then he, projected his spirit and went out into the ether and rode a magical horse all the way over to Jerusalem and visited the stone over there. And supposedly there's even hoof marks in the stone where Muhammad's horse launched off from to take him back home. So I guess what I'm saying is it seems like the stories about these 2 places link them together. And then when you look at Masonic rituals about it, okay, first there's lots of Masonic rituals about Solomon's Temple and depicting the Templars digging beneath Solomon's Temple to find treasures. And then in Shriner Masonry, which is sort of a modern invention, late 1800s, but definitely is a very important Masonic institution today. All their rituals are about Mecca, going to Mecca, and they actually pretend that they're Templars and that they are Muslims going to Mecca and finding the black stone and paying homage to it. And here's what's interesting, okay? In that ritual, they tell the initiate to bend down and kiss the black stone, which is what Muslims do at the Hajj, at the Kaaba, right?
Yeah.
Then in the ritual afterwards, they tell the initiate, there have been many times in your life where you said that you would never kiss someone's ass. Well, look, you just kissed the black stone of Casper. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Now, obviously, the language there implies they're connecting kissing the stone, the black stone at Mecca, with kissing an ass, and which is exactly, ties it right back to Templar rituals. This whole thing about ass kissing, which is you find in other occult rituals from the Templars onward, it seems to have really originated with them.
With who? The Muslims?
Well, I guess. Well, yeah, but they're kissing a stone,
right?
But here in Western occult ritual,
with the Shriners, right? Yeah,
they're symbolically connecting it with butt kissing. So I don't know what it all means, but it's one of the things I thought of is just that Baphomet is always depicted sitting on this stone, The stone is thought of as
Oh,
being
yeah.
like the alchemical stone. It's either sometimes shown as white, sometimes shown as black, but it's like a throne. He's seated on it. It's a seat. And God also sits on a throne that has magical stones beneath it.
And there's this magical stone underneath the throne of the Queen of England as well.
Exactly, yes. Which is supposedly Jacob's pillow stone. It's a similar story to Muhammad. He fell asleep on this stone and then had this vision of a tower going to heaven. So
do you think could that stone be the Philosopher's Stone?
Yes, or the symbolism is all connected, I guess. Now, what is the real thing in any of these stories? I don't know.
Right.
But
yeah.
all I can find is just that these things are connected somehow.
And what about what about Abraxas and Baphomet? Are they the same thing, do you think?
Kind of, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like anything, like I said, that Baphomet is the devil. Well, yes, he is, but Baphomet is a very specific incarnation of the devil. So I would say Baphomet and Abraxas are the same thing, but at the same time, you can look at one or the other independently. But yeah, I think that ultimately what it comes down to, the Templars thought that they had encountered this power that was essentially equal to God, that it may not be God himself, but it's doing all the same things that God does. And, some of them even might have had the hubris to imagine that they, through this power, they could become God themselves,
So it's about apotheosis then.
Yes. And that's what I think, all of these traditions have always been about. Trying to, at the very least, gain the perspective and understanding of God. And, also, I guess, for the more ambitious, trying to take the place of God. And, this is something I speculated about in my previous book, Clock Shavings, where, I got a lot of messages from Baphomet on the Ouija board about the end of the world and things like that. The apocalypse, the Antichrist. And he did seem to be indicating, here's what it seemed like he was indicating, that we're in some kind of a ship, really, like Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is like a universe in itself. If you think about it, he took all of the Noah took all of the elements of creation and took samples of them and put them all in this box. And then like the box was sort of hermetically sealed, and then everything around the box changed. And then when he opened it up again, he was in a new world, but it was like a chaos world. Everything is muddy and covered with water, and he had to recreate it out of the little samples that he had in his box. And the story Baphomet was kind of telling us about, and Cain also, we talked to him quite a bit. The impression we got from these spirits about what's coming in the apocalypse, which they totally believe in, is like that they think there's going to be a new destruction and recreation of the universe that we're in, and that they will somehow be able to become the pilots of that new ark and take over and redo creation.
Wow.
So I this all, I don't know what value this has to you, because this
that's
is really
actually
just,
beautiful.
speculation based on channeling, but
well,
that's what I came up with.
That's actually beautiful. Destruction and creation. I mean, that's it.
Yes, and I actually think maybe it was because I had just had this particular seance when I saw the movie Noah. But when I saw that movie, I saw the whole thing represented in the movie. It seemed like it was very symbolically connected with the story that Baphomet had just told me, where Tubal Cain, one of the bad guys, climbs on board the ark. He sneaks in and he's a stowaway, and they don't find him until later after everything's been destroyed. So it's like that's representing the plot that I was just describing. Someone, from the dark side, stowing away on the ark with the plan of taking over the new creation at the after the destruction. So anyway.
Yeah. And that kind of explains the rise of Masonry against Catholicism as well, like as a great apotheosis.
I think gosh, I don't know what's going on with the church and the Masons and the elite behind the scenes. I mean, it seems like you would think the church, ever since the Templars were arrested, the church has been separate from them and separate from Freemasonry and really against Freemasonry. So, you wonder what is the big theological difference between these two groups.
Well, until Vatican II, because Vatican II seems to be Freemasonry taking over the Catholic Church.
Well, that's what I wonder. Yeah, have these two groups reunited again? Obviously, they were connected in the beginning when the church chartered the Templars, and so has Freemasonry been a plot really to take over the church again and remake it in the image of something else. I think that's entirely possible, and the whole thing about the Priory of Zion, which is described as, quote, a hermetic Freemasonry in their own documents. And, a lot of the members, of course, you can't verify any of the old members from hundreds of years ago that they have on their lists. But we know that, this group existed in the 50s onward, and there are, people involved with it. You can verify who they are. A lot of them are Freemasons, and then some of them are involved in the church. And they at least like to allude in their literature and the interviews that they've given to people that they are heavily infiltrated in the church. So, I think the Da Vinci Code kind of alluded to this too.
Yeah.
That basically it's conspiracy within the church to take over the church. Now, they say it has something to do with the bloodline, supposedly coming from Jesus. But knowing what I know, I got to wonder if it's really this serpent bloodline that I've been talking about. I mean, it's like Abraxas and Baphomet are kind of Frankensteins. I think the Templars created Baphomet in a way that he had origins. They contacted real spirits and utilized those spirits in their creation. But I think they made Baphomet from a bunch of different pieces. And in that way, the image of a chimera, something that's a composite of different creatures, is the perfect way of representing that. I think that's what they did with Baphomet. And when the Masons are describing their god as being Jabulon, and it's this connection, that's this combination of three different gods from three different traditions, that's kind of describing the same thing. So yes.
Okay, right, yeah. And it says Jupiter, Baal, and Osiris.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
and
great.
Maybe this is a topic for another time, but Jupiter, it seems to be connected symbolically with Jehovah, the God of the Bible, and both are actually referred to by the term Jove. So, and even the word Jupiter can be connected to a Sumerian word, Sumerian god, Aya Pater, so God the Father. It seems like Jupiter is God in a way. And how does that work exactly? Why do the Freemasons pay homage to him essentially, with all the Great Seal of the United States and all these other symbols that they created at the birth of the United States? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that is something I would like to explore at some point.
Well, that's great. So can you give the listeners an idea where they can find out more information about you, Tracy?
Well, definitely go to tracytwyman.com. That's my website. It has all my articles. It has a link to my old website also with other articles, and then links to all of my books. And I would start actually with the current book. Why not? Start with Baphomet, the Temple Mystery Unveiled. That's the new book. And your mind is going to be so blown by that, and then you're going to want to know where it all came from, how it all started. So then you can go back and read my other books.
Yes, definitely. It's a fantastic book if there ever was one. So
Thank you very much.
thanks very much, Tracy.
Thank you for listening to jessewar.com. We hope that you have enjoyed this program and found it informative. Stay tuned and check back each Friday for a new episode. If you enjoy Jesse War Radio, please consider pledging at patreon.com/jessewar. Please like us on Facebook at facebook.com/jessewar and follow us on Twitter @jessewar. All one word. Farewell until next time.